When the 12th tutor fled the Carrington mansion with tears streaming down her face, no one knew that the man who would change everything would be a janitor with calloused hands and a broken heart. This is the story of two silent children, a powerful CEO who couldn't reach her own daughters, and how the most ordinary man in the building turned out to be the only one who knew how to listen. Stay until the end to see how this shattered family found their way back to each other. Don't forget to like and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled. The crystal vase hit the marble floor at exactly 3:47 p.m., shattering into 1,000 pieces that scattered across Evelyn Carrington's corner office like frozen tears. The sound echoed through the 42nd floor of Carrington Industries, cutting through the hushed atmosphere of executive privilege and making several assistants flinch at their desks outside. Evelyn didn't flinch. She stood perfectly still behind her glass desk, her slate gray suit immaculate, her dark hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her face into a mask of control. Only her hands betrayed her, trembling slightly as she gripped the edge of the desk. "I'm sorry, Ms. Carrington, but I simply cannot continue." Mrs. Patterson, the 12th tutor in 18 months, stood near the door with her coat already buttoned, her face blotchy from crying. "Those girls need help I'm not qualified to provide. I don't know what they need, but it isn't me." "The girls are 8 years old," Evelyn said, her voice flat and precise. "They need basic instruction in mathematics, literature, and social studies. That is what I hired you to provide. They need their mother." Mrs. Patterson said it quietly, but the words landed like another vase hitting the floor. Evelyn's jaw tightened. "I pay you $75 an hour to teach my daughters, not to psychoanalyze my parenting. You pay me to sit in a room with two children who won't speak, won't look at me, and spend their entire day staring out the window like they're waiting for someone who's never coming back." Mrs. Patterson's voice cracked. "Yesterday, when I tried to get Nora to complete a simple writing assignment, she just started crying. Silent crying, Miss Carrington. No sound at all. Just tears streaming down her face while she stared at nothing. And Claire didn't even react. She sat there doing her math problems like her sister wasn't falling apart 3 feet away." Evelyn's knuckles went white against the desk. "Children cry. It's manipulative behavior designed to... They're grieving." Mrs. Patterson's professionalism finally cracked completely. "Their father died a year ago, and you've buried yourself in this company while they're drowning in that enormous house with nobody but staff who are too afraid of you to do anything but follow orders." The silence that followed was arctic. "You're terminated," Evelyn said quietly. "HR will process your final payment. Leave your access card with my assistant." Mrs. Patterson opened her mouth, closed it, then shook her head sadly. "I hope you figure it out before it's too late, Ms. Carrington. I really do." When the door clicked shut, Evelyn finally moved. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked downtown Seattle, the Space Needle visible in the distance, the gray autumn sky pressing down on the city like a weight. 42 floors below, people moved like ants, going about their simple lives with their simple problems. She caught her reflection in the glass. 36 years old, beautiful in that sharp-edged way that made people keep their distance. Successful beyond most people's wildest dreams. CEO of a tech company worth $3 billion. Featured in Forbes, Fortune, Bloomberg. The woman who had everything. Except she didn't. She had 2 daughters who looked at her like she was a stranger. 2 little girls who used to laugh, who used to beg her to read them bedtime stories, who used to fight over who got to sit in her lap. Before Marcus died. Before the accident that took him away, and somehow took them with him, even though they'd survived without a scratch. Her phone buzzed. Rachel, her executive assistant. "Board meeting in 15 minutes. Yoshida is already in the conference room." Evelyn closed her eyes briefly, then straightened her shoulders. The company needed her. The quarterly numbers were down, the merger with Technova was hitting complications, and the board was getting nervous. She didn't have time for this. She'd find another tutor, a better one, someone more qualified, more professional, more capable of reaching 2 children who had locked themselves away so completely that even their own mother couldn't find the key. She gathered her tablet and notes, touched up her lipstick and the compact she kept in her desk drawer, and walked out of her office with the same measured stride that had intimidated competitors and inspired employees for a decade. No one looking at her would guess that her personal life was disintegrating. That was the point. The board meeting ran long, as they always did. Yoshida wanted reassurances about the merger timeline. Henderson questioned the marketing budget. Forrester, that smug bastard, suggested that perhaps Evelyn was distracted lately, letting her attention slip. She'd shut him down with 3 data points and a withering look that made him sink into his chair. It was after 7 when she finally left the building. The autumn darkness had settled over Seattle, bringing with it a cold drizzle that misted her windshield as she drove through downtown toward Queen Anne. The house, mansion really, though she hated that word, sat on a quiet street lined with maples, a sprawling Tudor revival that Marcus had fallen in love with. "Room for the girls to grow," he'd said. "Room for more kids, when we're ready." They'd never gotten ready. He'd been too busy building his architecture firm. She'd been too busy scaling the company, and then suddenly he was gone, his car crushed by a semi that had jackknifed on I-90 during a freak ice storm. The house was lit up when she arrived, every window glowing warm against the dark. It looked welcoming from the outside, like a home from a magazine. Inside was different. Maria, the housekeeper, met her at the door with that careful expression the staff all wore now. Sympathy mixed with wariness, never quite sure which version of Evelyn would walk through the door. "Good evening, Ms. Carrington. Dinner is ready whenever you'd like. The girls ate at 6. "How are they today?" Maria hesitated. "Quiet. They did their reading. Claire worked on some math problems on her own. Nora drew pictures." "Did they ask about Mrs. Patterson?" "No, ma'am." Of course they hadn't. The Tudors came and went like seasons now. Why would they bother asking? "I'll check on them before dinner." The girls' rooms were on the 2nd floor, connected by a shared bathroom. Evelyn climbed the curved staircase, her heels clicking on the hardwood, each step feeling heavier than the last. She paused outside Nora's door, raised her hand to knock, then let it fall. Through the crack in the door, she could see her daughter sitting on the window seat, knees pulled to her chest, staring out at the dark yard. The bedside lamp cast her in profile. Marcus's nose, Evelyn's eyes, a combination that sometimes hurt to look at. She was wearing the same clothes she'd had on this morning, her dark hair tangled because she'd stopped letting anyone brush it months ago. "Nora?" Evelyn pushed the door open. "Sweetheart, I'm home." Nora didn't turn, didn't acknowledge her presence at all. Evelyn walked into the room, sat carefully on the edge of the bed. "Mrs. Patterson won't be coming back. I'm going to find someone new. Someone better." Nothing. Just the sound of rain starting to tap against the window. "I know this has been hard. I know you miss Dad. I miss him too." The words felt wooden, rehearsed, because she'd said them so many times they'd lost all meaning. "But we have to keep going. We have to—" "You don't miss him." Nora's voice was barely a whisper, the first words she'd spoken directly to Evelyn in weeks. "You're never even here." The accusation landed like a physical blow. "I'm here now. You're always working. I'm working to take care of us. To keep this house to— I hate this house." Nora finally turned to look at her, and the emptiness in her 8-year-old eyes was terrifying. "I wish the truck had hit us instead of Daddy." Evelyn felt something crack inside her chest. "Don't say that. Don't ever say that." "Why not? It's true. You don't want us here. You just want us to be quiet and stay out of the way so you can work." "That's not—" Evelyn reached for her daughter, but Nora jerked away. "Don't touch me. You don't get to pretend now." Evelyn stood up, her composure fracturing. "I'm trying, Nora. I'm doing the best I can." "Your best sucks." Nora turned back to the window, curling into herself even tighter. "Just go away. That's what you're good at." Evelyn wanted to scream, wanted to shake her daughter, make her understand the impossible weight of keeping everything together alone, wanted to collapse on the floor and cry until there was nothing left. Instead, she walked out of the room, closing the door quietly behind her, because that's what she always did. Control, contain, compartmentalize. Claire's room was dark. Evelyn found her younger daughter by 8 minutes already in bed, the covers pulled up to her chin, her eyes open and staring at the ceiling. "Claire, are you okay?" "I'm fine." The response was automatic, emotionless. "Mrs. Patterson left today." "Okay. Do you want to talk about it?" "No." Evelyn stood in the doorway, useless. "I love you. You know that, right?" Claire said nothing, just kept staring at the ceiling like Evelyn wasn't even there. Downstairs, Evelyn sat at the dining room table with a plate of food she couldn't taste, in a house that felt like a mausoleum, wondering when exactly everything had fallen apart. Before Marcus died? During those years when they were both so focused on their careers that they'd let nannies and tutors raise their daughters? Or had it been broken from the start, and she'd just been too busy to notice? Her phone buzzed. An email from the board chair about tomorrow's strategy session. A text from her COO about the Technova merger. A reminder about the keynote speech she was giving at the tech conference next month. The company needed her. Her employees needed her. The shareholders needed her. But her daughters needed her more, and she had no idea how to be what they needed. That night, she lay awake in the master bedroom that still smelled faintly of Marcus's cologne, even after a year, and listened to the rain drum against the windows. Somewhere in the house, her daughters were sleeping, or not sleeping, she didn't know anymore. And the distance between her and them felt like an ocean she didn't know how to cross. She thought about Mrs. Patterson's words. "They need help I'm not qualified to provide." What kind of help? Therapy? She'd tried that. 3 different child psychologists, all of whom the girls had refused to speak to. Medication? The pediatrician had suggested it, gently, but the idea of drugging her daughters into compliance made Evelyn's stomach turn. Different schools? Private tutors? More quality time, whatever that meant? She'd tried everything, read every parenting book, followed every expert's advice, cleared her schedule for family dinners that ended with the girls picking at their food in silence before asking to be excused, planned weekend activities that they endured with the enthusiasm of prisoners on work detail. Nothing worked. Nothing reached them. And meanwhile, the company was suffering. Her focus was slipping. Forrester was right, much as she hated to admit it. She was distracted, scattered, making mistakes she never would have made before. The other day, she'd zoned out completely during a presentation, had to have her assistant gently remind her that someone had asked a question. She was failing at everything. CEO, mother, person. The rain got harder, slashing against the windows now, and somewhere in the house she thought she heard a sound. A cry? A door closing? She sat up, listening, but there was nothing except the storm. Tomorrow she'd call the placement agency again, find tutor number 13. Someone older, maybe, more experienced with difficult children, someone who wouldn't quit at the first sign of tears, someone who could fix what Evelyn couldn't. She didn't know, as she finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, that the person who would change everything wasn't anyone she'd ever think to hire, wasn't anyone with credentials or degrees or professional expertise. He was 3 floors below her at that very moment, emptying trash cans in the executive offices of Carrington Industries, invisible in the way that maintenance workers always are to people who live in corner offices. Bro, Daniel Hayes pushed his cart down the hallway of the 42nd floor, the wheels squeaking softly against the polished floor. The building was mostly empty at this hour, after 8 p.m. on a Thursday, just a few workaholics still hunched over their computers, ignoring him as he emptied their trash and wiped down their desks. He preferred the late shift. Fewer people meant fewer interactions, fewer chances for the awkward moments when someone would try to make small talk and he'd have to pretend to be interested in whatever they thought was important. Plus, the night differential added an extra $2 an hour to his paycheck, and every dollar mattered. He was 42, though people often guessed older. The gray in his dark hair had spread over the past few years, and there were lines around his eyes from squinting at too many problems he couldn't solve. He was tall, just over 6 feet, but had a way of making himself smaller, hunching his shoulders like he was trying to take up less space in the world. The executive floor was his last stop of the night. He methodically worked his way through the cubicles, offices, and conference rooms, his movements practiced and efficient. 20 years of janitorial work had taught him exactly how much effort each task required, how to clean thoroughly without wasting motion. He paused outside the corner office, Evelyn Carrington's domain. The lights were off, but he could see the broken vase scattered across the floor, glittering in the ambient light from the city outside. Daniel unlocked the door with his master key and flipped on the lights. The office was immaculate except for the shattered crystal. He got the broom and dustpan from his cart and carefully swept up the pieces, picking out the larger shards by hand. Expensive vase. Probably cost more than he made in a month. He wondered what had happened. An accident? Anger? The CEO didn't seem like the type to lose her temper, but then again, you never really knew what people were like behind their masks. He'd seen her a handful of times over the years, always from a distance. She'd never looked at him directly, never acknowledged his existence beyond maybe a slight nod if they passed in a hallway. He was furniture to people like her, part of the building, noticed only when something was wrong. That was fine. He preferred it that way. He dumped the broken crystal in the trash, then wiped down her desk, arranged her chair, and moved on to the conference room. 45 minutes later, the executive floor was pristine, and Daniel was pushing his cart toward the service elevator. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, saw the name on the screen, and felt his stomach tighten. Yeah? Mr. Hayes, this is Sandra from Harmony Heights. I'm calling about Ethan. Daniel closed his eyes. What happened? He's fine, nothing serious. But he had an episode during dinner, threw his plate, knocked over his chair. We got him calmed down, but I wanted to let you know. Did something trigger it? The overhead light was flickering. You know how he gets with the fluorescent lights. I've asked you to seat him away from those lights. We try, Mr. Hayes, but we have 15 residents and limited seating. We do our best. Well, Daniel bit back the response he wanted to give, that their best wasn't good enough, that his son deserved better than we try, that the $4,000 a month he paid for this facility should buy something more than excuses. Can I talk to him? He's already asleep. The medication, you medicated him. Daniel's hand tightened on the phone. Just the standard dose, as prescribed, to help him settle. I'll be there first thing in the morning. Mr. Hayes, I really don't think... First thing, Daniel said, and hung up. He stood there in the empty hallway, the phone heavy in his hand, feeling the familiar weight settle over him. Ethan, his boy, 14 years old and stuck in a group home because Daniel couldn't take care of him alone, couldn't afford a private nurse or specialized care or any of the things the doctors said would help. Could barely afford Harmony Heights, honestly, even with his 2 jobs, this one and the weekend work at the hardware store. The doctors had diagnosed Ethan with severe autism when he was 3. For years, Daniel and his wife Sarah had navigated therapies, special schools, medication trials, and the grinding reality of raising a child who might never speak, never make eye contact, never be able to live independently. Then Sarah got sick, ovarian cancer, stage 4 by the time they found it. She'd fought for 2 years, brutal years of chemo and radiation and false hopes, while Daniel worked 3 jobs to pay the medical bills and Ethan spiraled without his mother's steady presence. She died on a Tuesday in March, and something in Ethan broke completely. He'd stopped eating, stopped sleeping, started hurting himself, banging his head against walls, scratching his arms until they bled. The doctor said he needed residential care, at least temporarily. That was 3 years ago. Daniel visited every weekend, brought Ethan home for holidays, was trying to save enough to maybe, someday, afford to bring his son home permanently. But the math never worked. The care Ethan needed cost more than Daniel could make. Would always cost more. So he cleaned buildings at night and sold paint and hammers on weekends, and every month he sent a check to Harmony Heights and tried not to think about how he'd failed as a father. The service elevator arrived and Daniel pushed his cart inside. His reflection stared back at him from the polished doors, a tired man in a gray uniform with Spartan cleaning services embroidered on the chest, going nowhere, doing nothing that mattered. By the time he got home to his studio apartment in Renton, it was after 11. The place was barely 400 square feet, a Murphy bed, a kitchenette, a bathroom the size of a closet. The walls were thin enough that he could hear his neighbor's TV, some late-night talk show laugh track bleeding through. He microwaved leftovers from 2 days ago, ate standing at the counter, then fell into bed still wearing his work clothes. Tomorrow was Friday. One more shift at Carrington Industries, then 2 days at the hardware store. Then Sunday, he'd drive out to Harmony Heights and spend 6 hours with Ethan, trying to coax his son into looking at him, speaking to him, showing any sign that he remembered who Daniel was. This was his life. Simple, small, and slowly crushing him. He didn't know that in 3 days, everything would change. That a moment of pure chance would put him in the path of 2 broken little girls who needed someone exactly like him. That the emptiness that had hollowed him out would become the space where healing could begin. He just knew that he was tired and alone, and that sleep, when it came, was a mercy. Friday evening, Evelyn sat in her office well past sunset, staring at her computer screen without seeing it. The merger documents were due for review, but the words blurred together. She'd read the same paragraph 5 times. Her phone rang. The agency. Ms. Carrington, I've been making calls about your position, and I have to be honest. It's proving difficult. Your requirements are very specific, and word has gotten around about the high turnover. I pay extremely well. It's not about the money. It's about... The woman on the other end paused delicately. The tutors have been sharing their experiences. They're concerned about the children's psychological state, and frankly, about working in such a high-pressure environment. The children are 8 years old. They need basic academic instruction. Ms. Carrington, with all due respect, I think what they need is beyond the scope of a traditional tutor. Have you considered family therapy, or perhaps just find me someone qualified? Evelyn's voice was sharp. That's what I'm paying you for. She hung up and pressed her palms against her eyes. The headache that had been building all day was now a steady throb behind her temples. A knock at her door. Rachel, her assistant, poked her head in. I'm heading out. Do you need anything before I go? No, thank you. Rachel hesitated. Ms. Carrington, are you okay? The question was so unexpected that Evelyn actually looked up. Rachel was 28, efficient and professional, had worked for Evelyn for 3 years without ever crossing the line into personal territory. I'm fine. It's just, you seem... Rachel trailed off, clearly rethinking whatever she'd been about to say. Never mind. Have a good weekend. After she left, Evelyn sat in the silence of her office, listening to the buildings settle around her. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear a vacuum cleaner, the cleaning crew making their rounds. She should go home. The girls would be asleep soon, not that they'd notice whether she was there or not. Maria would handle bedtime like she handled everything else. Instead, Evelyn stayed at her desk, working until the words on the screen lost all meaning, until her eyes burned and her back ached, and the city lights outside blurred into abstract patterns. It was past midnight when she finally packed up her things. The executive floor was dark and empty, except for the exit signs casting red pools of light. Her heels echoed as she walked toward the elevator. She didn't notice the janitor working in the conference room she passed. Didn't see Daniel look up briefly as she went by, then returned to wiping down the table. 2 people on separate paths, orbiting in the same space, not yet understanding that their trajectories were about to intersect in ways neither of them could imagine. Saturday morning, Daniel drove out to Harmony Heights, the group home located in a converted residential facility in Bellevue. The building was trying hard to look cheerful, painted pale yellow with window boxes full of plastic flowers. But institutional was institutional, no matter how much you dressed it up. Ethan was in the common room, sitting in his usual spot by the window, rocking slightly. He was 14 but looked younger, small for his age, with dark hair that stuck up no matter how much Daniel tried to smooth it down. He wore the noise-canceling headphones Daniel had bought him, blocking out the chaos of the other residents. Hey, buddy. Daniel sat down in the chair next to him, careful not to touch. Ethan didn't like being touched without warning. How are you doing? Ethan didn't respond, didn't look at him. Just kept rocking, his eyes fixed on something outside the window that only he could see. Sandra said you had a rough night. The flickering light? Nothing. Daniel sat with him for an hour, talking quietly about nothing important. The weather, something he'd seen on TV, a bird's nest he'd noticed on his drive over. Ethan showed no sign of hearing any of it. This was normal. Some visits, Ethan would engage a little, hand Daniel a toy, mimic a sound, make brief eye contact. But most visits were like this. Daniel talking to a son who had retreated so far inside himself that reaching him felt impossible. I brought you something. Daniel pulled out a small fidget toy, one of those infinity cubes that Ethan sometimes liked. He set it on the table between them. Ethan's rocking slowed. His eyes shifted just for a second toward the cube. Then he reached out, picked it up, started manipulating it with the kind of intense focus he gave to things that interested him. It wasn't much, but it was something. Daniel stayed until lunch, helped feed Ethan when his son refused to hold the spoon himself, then said goodbye to a boy who didn't acknowledge his leaving. On the drive back to his apartment, Daniel felt the familiar ache settle in his chest. The what-ifs that never stopped. What if Sarah hadn't gotten sick? What if they'd caught the cancer earlier? What if he made more money, could afford better care, could bring Ethan home? What if he was a better father? He stopped at the grocery store, bought the cheapest versions of everything he needed, paid with exact cash because his checking account was down to double digits until payday. Then he went home to his tiny apartment and tried not to think about how small his life had become. Monday morning, Evelyn stood in front of Nora and Claire in the study that served as their classroom, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. "We're going to try something different," she said. "Instead of a regular tutor, I'm going to work with you myself for a while." The girls sat at their respective desks, not looking at her. Nora stared out the window. Claire examined her pencil like it was the most fascinating object in the world. "I've cleared my mornings. We'll do lessons from 8 to noon. Then you'll have lunch and free time in the afternoon." Silence. "I thought we could start with reading. I know you both enjoy books." More silence. Evelyn felt her frustration rising, but forced it down. "Nora, can you please look at me when I'm speaking to you?" Nora's jaw tightened, but she didn't turn. "Nora." "What?" The word was hostile, defensive. "I'm trying here. I need you to meet me halfway." "We didn't ask you to try." Claire spoke up, her voice flat. "We didn't ask for any of this." "Well, you're getting it anyway, because I'm your mother, and you're not our mother." Nora finally turned to face her, and the anger in her expression was stunning. "You're just someone who lives in the same house and signs our report cards." The words hit harder than any physical blow could have. Evelyn stood there, speechless, while her 8-year-old daughter stared her down with eyes full of hurt and fury. "Your father wouldn't want—" "Don't you dare!" Nora stood up, her hands balled into fists. "Don't you dare talk about Dad. You don't get to use him to make us do what you want." "Sit down, Nora." "No." "Sit. Down." "Make me." They stared at each other, locked in a battle of wills that Evelyn knew she was losing. Behind Nora, Claire had started crying, still silent, still heartbreaking. Evelyn's phone buzzed. She glanced at it instinctively. An emergency board meeting? They needed her at the office immediately. When she looked back up, Nora was smiling, but it was a terrible smile, knowing and sad. "See? You don't really want to be here anyway. Just go. That's what you always do." And Evelyn, hating herself even as she did it, left. Bakut. That evening, Daniel was cleaning the executive floor when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong in the empty building after hours. A soft sobbing, muffled but unmistakable. He paused, listening. It was coming from one of the smaller conference rooms down the hall. Protocol said to ignore it. If someone was working late and crying, that was their business, not his. He should just finish his route and leave. But the sound pulled at something in him. It was a child crying. He was sure of it. Daniel set down his spray bottle and walked quietly down the hall. The conference room door was slightly ajar, lights off inside. He pushed it open carefully. A little girl sat under the table, knees pulled to her chest, crying as silently as she could manage. She wore expensive clothes, designer jeans and a cashmere sweater, and had dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that was starting to come loose. She looked up when the door opened, her eyes widening with fear. "Hey," Daniel said softly, staying in the doorway. "You okay?" The girl scrambled back further under the table, trying to make herself smaller. "I'm not going to hurt you. I work here. I clean the offices." He showed her his cart in the hallway, the cleaning supplies, trying to look as non-threatening as possible. "Are you lost?" She shook her head slightly. "Are you supposed to be here?" A longer pause, then a small nod. "With your mom or dad?" Another nod. Daniel thought about the crying, the fear, the way she was hiding under a table. "Did something happen? Are you hurt?" "No." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Do you want me to find whoever you're here with?" "No!" The panic in her voice was clear. "Please don't. I just needed to be alone." Daniel understood that feeling. He stayed in the doorway, not moving closer, giving her space. "Okay, I won't tell anyone, but I can't leave you here by yourself. What if I just sit out here in the hall, keep you company from a distance? Would that be all right?" She studied him with those wary eyes, clearly trying to decide if he was safe. "My name's Daniel," he offered. "I have a son about your age, well, a little older, 14. "I'm 8, she said quietly. 8's a good age. Not really. Daniel sat down in the hallway, his back against the wall opposite the door. No? What's wrong with 8? For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then, everything. And somehow, in the quiet of that empty building, with a scared little girl hiding under a table and a janitor sitting in a hallway, something shifted. Some invisible wall cracked just enough to let a little truth through. Yeah, Daniel said quietly. I know that feeling. They sat there for nearly 20 minutes, Daniel in the hallway and the girl under the table, neither one speaking. He could hear her breathing evening out, the tears subsiding into occasional hitches and sniffles. The building's ventilation system hummed overhead, and somewhere far below, a door opened and closed. Finally, she crawled out from under the table, moving slowly like she wasn't quite sure what to expect from him. In the dim light from the hallway, Daniel could see her face clearly now, red-rimmed eyes, blotchy cheeks, an expression that seemed far too old for 8 years. What's your name? He asked, still keeping his distance. Nora. That's a nice name. She shrugged, wrapping her arms around herself. Are you going to tell my mom you found me? Is your mom here in the building? Her office is on this floor. She's in a meeting. Nora's voice went flat when she said it, like she was reporting the weather. Daniel pieced it together. Executive kid, brought to the office because there was nowhere else for her to go, left alone while the parent worked late. He'd seen it before, though not often this late in the evening. Do you come here a lot? Sometimes, when Mom has important meetings and can't find anyone to stay with us. Us? Nora's expression shifted, something like guilt crossing her face. My sister, Claire. She's probably still in Mom's office, reading or something. And you needed a break? Nora's voice cracked slightly. I hate it there. Everything's glass and steel, and everyone talks in quiet voices like they're at a funeral. And Mom just sits at her computer and types, and we're supposed to sit there and be quiet and not bother her. Daniel nodded slowly. Sounds lonely. It's stupid, Nora said, but her voice wavered. I shouldn't complain. Mom says lots of kids have it worse. We have a nice house and good food, and she pays for tutors, and money doesn't fix lonely, Daniel said quietly. Nora looked at him then, really looked, and something in her expression crumpled. Everybody left, she whispered. First Dad died, and then it was like Mom died too, except she's still here, still breathing, still going to work every day. And the tutors keep leaving, and nobody stays, and nobody... She stopped, pressing her hands to her face. Nobody wants us. The words hit Daniel square in the chest, echoing his own fears about Ethan. Nobody wants us. How many times had he thought that exact thing, watching the staff at Harmony Heights handle his son with clinical efficiency but no warmth? How many times had he wondered if Ethan felt abandoned, even though Daniel visited every week? Your mom brought you here tonight, he said carefully. That means she wants you with her, even when she's working. She brought us because Maria has the flu and she couldn't find anyone else. Still, she didn't leave you at home alone. She might as well have. Nora slumped against the door frame. We're just furniture to her, things she has to deal with between meetings. Daniel wanted to argue, to defend the mother he'd never actually spoken to, but he couldn't. He didn't know Evelyn Carrington beyond her public reputation. And he did know what it felt like to be so consumed by just surviving that you stopped really seeing the people who needed you most. What did your dad do? He asked instead. Before, when he was around? Nora's whole face changed. He was an architect. He designed buildings. He used to bring home blueprints and show us how everything fit together, the beams and walls and windows. He said buildings were like puzzles, and if you put the pieces together right, you could make something beautiful that would last forever. Sounds like he was good at his job. He was good at everything. Nora's voice went soft, remembering. He made pancakes on Saturday mornings. Really terrible pancakes, all lumpy and burned, but he'd make funny faces with chocolate chips and we'd eat them anyway. And he'd read to us before bed, doing all the different voices. Mom would work late, but Dad was always there. He sounds like a good dad. He was the best dad. Tears started again, quieter this time. And then some stupid truck driver fell asleep and now he's gone. And Mom can't even look at us without looking sad or angry or just empty. Like we remind her of something she lost and she wishes we'd disappear too. Daniel didn't have words for that kind of pain. What could he possibly say that wouldn't sound hollow? So he just sat there, present and listening, while this little girl grieved for a father who wasn't coming back and a mother who'd emotionally checked out. My wife died, he heard himself say. 3 years ago, cancer. Nora's crying paused. She looked up at him. And my son, Ethan, he doesn't live with me anymore. He needs special care, the kind I can't give him on my own. So he lives in a group home and I visit on weekends, and sometimes he doesn't even look at me. Sometimes I think he's forgotten who I am. That's horrible, Nora whispered. Yeah, it is. Daniel leaned his head back against the wall. But I keep showing up anyway. Keep visiting. Keep talking to him, even when he doesn't respond, because that's what you do for people you love. You show up, even when it's hard, even when it hurts. Does it get easier? No, Daniel said honestly, but you get stronger at carrying it. They sat in silence again, but it felt different now. Less like two strangers occupying the same space and more like two people who understood something fundamental about loss and loneliness. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, sharp and quick. A woman's voice called out, tight with stress. Nora, where are you? Nora tensed. That's my mom. Should I? Please don't tell her I was crying, Nora said quickly. She gets upset when we cry. She thinks it's, I don't know, manipulation or something. Before Daniel could respond, Evelyn Carrington appeared around the corner, her face tight with worry that shifted instantly to relief and then to something harder when she saw Nora sitting on the floor near the janitor. Nora, what are you doing out here? I told you to stay in my office with your sister. I needed to use the bathroom, Nora lied smoothly. I got turned around coming back. Evelyn's eyes flicked to Daniel, her expression going carefully neutral. Did this man... He helped me find my way back, Nora interrupted. I was lost and he was cleaning, and he showed me which hallway to take. The relief on Evelyn's face was brief but visible. Thank you, she said to Daniel, the words polite but distant. I apologize for any inconvenience. No inconvenience, ma'am. Evelyn held out her hand to Nora. Come on, the meeting's finishing up. We'll be leaving soon. Nora took her mother's hand but glanced back at Daniel as they walked away. He saw her mouth the words thank you before they disappeared around the corner. Daniel sat there for another minute, processing what had just happened. Then he got up, grabbed his cart, and went back to cleaning conference rooms, trying to shake the feeling that something significant had just occurred, though he couldn't quite name what. He didn't see Nora again that night, but he thought about her on the bus ride home, thought about her sitting under that table crying silently, thought about the way she'd said nobody wants us, with such absolute conviction. Some pain, he understood. You couldn't clean up with a mop and bucket. The next morning, Evelyn drove the girls home in silence. They sat in the back seat, Nora staring out the window, Claire reading a book. Evelyn kept glancing at them in the rearview mirror, trying to read their expressions, trying to find some way into whatever was happening in their heads. I'm sorry about last night, she finally said. I know it wasn't ideal bringing you to the office so late. It's fine, Claire said without looking up from her book. Maria should be better in a few days. Then things can go back to normal. Neither girl responded. Nora, you said you got lost last night. Nora's shoulders stiffened slightly. Yeah. The janitor who helped you, had you seen him before? No. Why? I need to make sure you're safe. You can't just talk to random people in the building. You talk to random people all day long. That's literally your job. Evelyn's hands tightened on the wheel. That's different. How? Because I'm an adult and you're a child. So I'm supposed to just wander around lost because I can't ask anyone for help? That's not what I... Evelyn stopped herself, recognizing the trap. Any response would just lead to more arguing. Just be more careful next time. There won't be a next time, Nora muttered. You'll find some other babysitter who doesn't have the flu. Evelyn wanted to argue that she wasn't looking for a babysitter, that she was trying to include them in her life, that bringing them to the office was better than leaving them home alone. But the words felt flimsy even in her own head. When they got home, the girls disappeared to their rooms immediately. Evelyn stood in the kitchen, Maria's absence making the house feel even emptier than usual, and tried to figure out what she was supposed to do with the rest of the day. Work emails. She could catch up on work emails. At least that was something she knew how to do. She was 3 messages deep when her phone rang. The agency. Ms. Carrington, I have an update on the tutor situation. Please tell me you found someone. Not exactly. The truth is, I've contacted every qualified educator in our network, and none of them are willing to take the position. Evelyn felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. None of them? The turnover has created a reputation. People are concerned about the working conditions. The working conditions are excellent. I pay above market rate. The house is beautiful. The girls are struggling, Ms. Carrington, and the tutors feel you're looking for someone to fix them rather than support them through whatever they're dealing with. That's ridiculous. With respect, perhaps the issue isn't finding the right tutor. Perhaps it's addressing the underlying problems that are making the position so difficult. Evelyn ended the call, anger and frustration warring in her chest. She threw her phone onto the couch and stood there, breathing hard, trying to maintain the composure that was slipping through her fingers like water. She couldn't do this, couldn't balance the company and the girls and her own sanity. Something had to give, and she had no idea what. Upstairs, she could hear the faint sound of Nora and Claire talking to each other, their voices low and private. At least they still talked to each other. At least they had that. Evelyn sat down at the kitchen table and put her head in her hands, allowing herself exactly 5 minutes to fall apart. Then she'd pull herself together, make a plan, fix this like she fixed everything else. Except she was starting to suspect that this wasn't something you could fix with planning and determination. This was something else entirely, something that required skills she'd never developed. The girls appeared in the kitchen doorway an hour later, hovering uncertainly. "We're hungry," Claire said. Evelyn looked at the clock. Past noon. She'd completely lost track of time. "Right. Lunch. I'll make something." She opened the refrigerator, stared at its contents like they were written in a foreign language. Maria usually handled meals. Evelyn had forgotten how to cook somewhere between building the company and losing Marcus. "We can have cereal," Nora offered, clearly not expecting much. "No, I'll make sandwiches." "I can make sandwiches." It was a disaster. The bread was stale, she couldn't find anything to put on it except some questionable lunch meat and wilted lettuce, and she managed to cut her finger on the knife while slicing tomatoes that immediately fell apart into mush. The girls watched her fumble around their own kitchen with expressions that mixed pity with resignation. "Mom, we can just order pizza," Claire said gently. "I can make lunch for my own daughters," Evelyn snapped, then immediately regretted her tone when they both flinched. She finished assembling the saddest sandwiches she'd ever seen and put them on plates. The girls ate without complaint, but she could see them picking around the worst parts. This was her life now. Failing at the most basic tasks of parenthood, while her company limped along under her distracted leadership. Her phone buzzed. Another crisis at work. The Technova merger was hitting snags. They needed her input immediately. She looked at the girls, then at the phone, then back at the girls. "I need to take this call. It'll just be a few minutes." Nora's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes went cold. "Sure, go ahead. I'll be right back, but we know the drill, Mom." Evelyn took the call in her office, and the few minutes turned into an hour, and when she came back out, the girls had cleaned up lunch and disappeared to their rooms again. She stood in the empty kitchen, surrounded by silence and her own failures, and wondered how much longer she could keep pretending she had any idea what she was doing. Daniel spent his Saturday at the hardware store, helping customers find the right paint colors and explaining the difference between wood screws and drywall screws to DIY enthusiasts who thought they knew what they were doing. It was mind-numbing work, but it paid $9 an hour and every dollar mattered. Between customers, his mind kept drifting back to the girl under the table. Nora. Something about her had gotten under his skin, the way she'd articulated that particular brand of abandonment. Nobody wants us. He thought about Ethan at Harmony Heights, sitting in that common room, surrounded by people, but utterly alone. He thought about driving out there tomorrow, trying once again to connect with a son who'd drifted so far away he seemed unreachable. "Excuse me, do you work here?" A customer interrupted his thoughts. "Yes, ma'am. How can I help you?" Sunday morning, he made the drive to Bellevue under gray skies threatening rain. Harmony Heights looked especially depressing in the flat light, the yellow paint garish and false. Inside, he found Ethan in his usual spot, but something was different. His son was agitated, rocking harder than normal, his hands flapping in sharp, jerky movements. "What's going on?" Daniel asked Sandra, who was hovering nearby. He's been like this since breakfast. We're not sure what triggered it. Daniel approached slowly. Hey, buddy. It's me. It's Dad. Ethan's rocking intensified. He made a sound, low and distressed, and Daniel's heart clenched. Can I take him outside? Sometimes the fresh air helps. Sandra hesitated. He's pretty worked up. Are you sure? He's my son, I'm sure. They went out to the small courtyard, barely more than a concrete patio with some potted plants. The air was cold and damp, but Ethan's agitation started to ease slightly. Daniel sat on the ground next to him, not touching, just being present. I don't know what's wrong, Daniel said quietly. I wish you could tell me. I wish I knew how to help you. Ethan kept rocking, but slower now. I met this girl the other day. She was crying, hiding under a table. Her dad died and her mom's trying but doesn't know how to reach her. It reminded me of us, kind of, both trying to figure out how to be okay when everything's broken. Ethan's hands stopped flapping. He picked up a pebble from the ground, turned it over and over in his fingers with intense focus. I told her about you, Daniel continued. Told her about your mom. I don't usually talk about that stuff, but something about her, she needed to know she wasn't alone in feeling alone, you know? The pebble moved from one hand to the other, a rhythmic motion that seemed to calm Ethan further. They sat there for an hour, Daniel talking occasionally. Ethan focused on his pebble. It wasn't connection exactly, but it was something. A moment of peace in the chaos. When Daniel brought Ethan back inside, he felt the familiar ache of leaving, walking out while his son stayed behind, trapped in a world Daniel couldn't protect him from. On the drive home, he thought about Nora again. Wondered if she was okay. Wondered if her mother had figured out how to reach her, or if she was still floundering, still pushing people away with one hand while desperately trying to hold everything together with the other. Monday night, Daniel was back at Carrington Industries, pushing his cart through the executive floor. He'd just finished cleaning the break room when he heard voices from one of the conference rooms. Sharp, angry voices that made him pause. I don't care what the board thinks. We're not diluting our position just to make them comfortable. Evelyn Carrington's voice was ice. Ms. Carrington, they have valid concerns about. Their concerns are noted. My decision stands. Daniel moved on quickly, not wanting to eavesdrop. He worked his way down the hallway, emptying trash cans and wiping down desks, trying to be invisible. He was outside Evelyn's office when he heard a different sound, softer, someone crying, trying to muffle it. He looked around, saw the door to the small storage closet slightly ajar. Through the gap, he could see a flash of movement. Daniel knocked gently on the closet door. Hello? The crying stopped abruptly. Nora, is that you? A pause, then, go away. Are you okay? I said go away. Daniel stayed where he was. I'm going to sit out here for a bit, if that's all right, just to make sure you're safe. I don't need a babysitter. Didn't say you did. He sat down with his back against the wall, exactly like he'd done the week before. After a minute, the closet door opened wider and Nora emerged, her eyes red and her face defiant. Why are you here? She asked accusingly. I work here. I clean the offices. I mean, why are you here sitting outside a closet talking to me? Because you're upset and you shouldn't be alone when you're upset. I'm fine. Okay. Nora slumped against the opposite wall, sliding down until she was sitting on the floor facing him. My mom brought us here again. Claire's in her office reading. I'm supposed to be reading too, but I can't concentrate because Mom keeps having these tense phone calls and everything feels... She gestured helplessly. Wrong. Everything feels wrong. Where's the wrong feeling coming from? Everywhere. Home. School. Except we don't go to school, we have tutors. Except we don't have a tutor anymore because they all quit. So now Mom's trying to teach us herself, but she doesn't know how, and she gets frustrated, and then we get frustrated, and it's just... Nora pulled her knees to her chest. It's a mess. We're a mess. You're 8, Daniel said. You're supposed to be a mess. Mom says we need to be better, more cooperative, more... She made air quotes with her fingers. Resilient. Your mom's probably scared. Of what? Of losing you. She already lost your dad. Maybe she's terrified of losing you too, just in a different way. Nora was quiet for a moment. She has a funny way of showing it. She's never around. Even when she's around, she's not really around, you know? She's always on her phone or thinking about work. Sometimes when people are scared, they run toward the thing they can control. For your mom, that's probably her job. Well, she can't control us, so she should probably give up trying. Is that what you want? For her to give up? I don't know what I want. Nora's voice cracked. I want Dad back. I want things to be like they were before. I want to stop feeling like this all the time, like I'm drowning and nobody notices. Daniel understood that feeling intimately. Have you told your mom that? She doesn't listen. She just tries to fix things, hiring tutors, buying stuff, making schedules. But none of that fixes the actual problem, which is that she's not here, that she doesn't see us, that we... Nora's voice dropped to a whisper. That we miss her just as much as we miss Dad, but she's still alive, so we're not allowed to grieve her. The insight was devastating, especially coming from an 8-year-old. Daniel sat with it, trying to find words that wouldn't sound patronizing or empty. Maybe you should tell her that, he said finally. Exactly what you just told me. She wouldn't understand. You might be surprised. Footsteps approached and both of them tensed, but it was just another late-working employee passing by, oblivious to their presence in the hallway. When the sound faded, Nora said, "Why are you being nice to me? You don't even know me." "I know what it feels like to hurt. I know what it feels like when nobody sees you." Daniel thought about Ethan, alone in that group home. Sometimes people need someone to witness their pain, to say, yeah, this is hard, and you're not crazy for struggling with it. Are you struggling with something? Yeah, my son, the one I told you about. He's not doing great, and I can't help him because I don't have the money or the time or the... He stopped himself. Sorry, you don't need to hear about my problems. No, it's... Nora looked at him with something like wonder. It's kind of nice, knowing grown-ups struggle too. Mom always acts like she has everything under control. She probably doesn't. I know, I can tell, but she won't admit it. They sat in companionable silence for a while. Two people from completely different worlds who'd somehow found common ground in their mutual brokenness. I should probably get back, Nora said eventually. Mom will notice I'm gone. You going to be okay? Probably not. But I'll survive. That's what Mom says we're supposed to do. Just survive until things get better. Things will get better, Daniel said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. You don't know that. No, but I hope it anyway. Nora stood up, brushed off her pants. Thanks for sitting with me. Any time. She started to walk away, then turned back. What's your name? I know you said it before, but I forgot. Daniel Hayes. I'm Nora Carrington, but you already knew that. Nice to officially meet you, Nora. She almost smiled. Almost. Then she disappeared around the corner, back toward her mother's office, and whatever fragile equilibrium they were trying to maintain. Daniel sat there for another minute before getting back to work. He told himself to stop getting involved, that these weren't his problems to solve, but something about Nora's pain called to his own, and he couldn't quite make himself look away. That night, Evelyn noticed Nora had been gone longer than a bathroom trip should take, but when her daughter reappeared, she looked calmer somehow, less brittle. Everything okay? Evelyn asked. Fine. It wasn't fine. Nothing was fine. But Evelyn didn't push. She'd learned that pushing just made the girls retreat further. They left the building around 9, the city dark and quiet around them. Evelyn drove home through streets she knew by heart, her daughter silent in the back seat, and tried not to think about how this was becoming a pattern, how she was dragging them to her office more and more often because she couldn't find anyone willing to watch them, couldn't find anyone who could reach them, couldn't reach them herself. At home, she tucked them into bed with the efficiency of someone completing a task rather than the tenderness of a mother saying goodnight. Nora accepted the perfunctory kiss on her forehead without comment. Claire was already asleep, or pretending to be. In her own room, Evelyn lay awake, staring at the ceiling, running through mental checklists of everything that needed her attention. The merger, the board meeting, the product launch, the hiring freeze, the budget review. Her daughters crying in closets and conference rooms while she took phone calls and sent emails. She thought about what the agency woman had said. Perhaps the issue isn't finding the right tutor. But if the issue wasn't the tutor, then it was her. And Evelyn didn't know how to fix herself when she was barely holding the pieces together as it was. Tuesday morning brought another crisis at work. A bug in the software that was about to ship, a problem that required her immediate attention. Evelyn left the girls with Maria, who was back from her flu but still looking pale and tired, and drove to the office before dawn. She was so focused on the crisis that she didn't notice the janitor cleaning her office when she arrived at 6 a.m., didn't register his presence until he spoke. "Morning, ma'am." Evelyn looked up, startled. It was the same man from the other night, the one who'd found Nora. "Good morning." She set down her coffee, studied him properly for the first time. Older, maybe mid-40s. Tired eyes. Careful, economical movements. "You're here early." "Late shift runs until 6. Just finishing up." "Right." She pulled out her laptop, ready to dismiss him and get to work. "Your daughter seems like a good kid," Daniel said, and Evelyn froze. "Excuse me?" "Nora. I ran into her again last night. She was upset, needed someone to talk to." Evelyn's professional mask slammed into place. "You talked to my daughter? Alone?" "She was alone in a hallway, crying. I sat with her for a few minutes to make sure she was okay." "That's—" Evelyn stood up, anger and fear mixing into something caustic. "You don't talk to children you don't know, especially not my children. Do you understand?" Daniel took a step back, his expression carefully neutral. "Yes, ma'am. I apologize if I overstepped." "You did, significantly." Evelyn's voice was sharp enough to cut. "If I find out you've approached my daughters again, I'll have security remove you from the building and file a formal complaint with your supervisor." "Understood." He left without another word, pushing his cart out of her office. Evelyn stood there, trembling with adrenaline, trying to tell herself she'd done the right thing, protecting her children from a stranger who'd overstepped boundaries. But something nagged at her. The way Nora had seemed calmer after those conversations. The way Daniel had spoken about her daughter with genuine concern, not threat. She shook it off and dove into the software crisis, letting work swallow her whole. Daniel spent the rest of his shift replaying the conversation in his head, Evelyn's words cutting deeper each time. He understood her reaction, a mother protecting her children from a strange man. He'd have done the same if someone approached Ethan without his permission, but it still stung, the assumption that he was a threat rather than someone who'd simply tried to help. He finished his rounds mechanically, emptied the last trash cans, locked up his cart in the supply closet on the ground floor. The building was waking up around him, early arrivals filtering in through the lobby, the elevators beginning their daily cycle. He clocked out at 6:15 and caught the bus back to Renton, wedged between a woman who smelled like cigarettes and a kid listening to music so loud Daniel could hear every word through his headphones. At home, he showered and tried to sleep, but his mind wouldn't settle. He kept thinking about Nora, hiding and crying, about Claire, silent and invisible in her mother's office, about Evelyn, sharp and defensive and probably just as scared as her daughters, even if she'd never admit it. It wasn't his problem. He'd been told to stay away, and he would. He had enough of his own problems without borrowing someone else's. Except he couldn't stop seeing Nora's face when she'd said, "Nobody wants us." Couldn't stop hearing the exhaustion in her voice when she'd talked about just surviving. He gave up on sleep around noon and went for a walk through his neighborhood, past the rundown apartment complexes and convenience stores with barred windows. A kid rode by on a bike with a bent wheel that squeaked with every rotation. Two old men played chess on a folding table outside the laundromat. Normal people living normal lives, getting by. Daniel stopped at the corner market and bought instant noodles and the cheapest coffee they had. The cashier didn't make eye contact, just scanned his items and held out her hand for payment. He was invisible here too, just in a different way. That night at the hardware store, he helped a young couple pick out paint for their first apartment. They were excited, talking over each other about color schemes and accent walls, holding paint chips up to the light. Daniel remembered that feeling, back when he and Sarah had first moved in together, before Ethan, before the diagnosis, before cancer. When the biggest problem was whether to go with eggshell or satin finish. "What do you think?" the woman asked him, holding up two nearly identical shades of blue. "Which one's better?" Daniel looked at them, saw no real difference, but understood that the question mattered to her. "The one on the left has warmer undertones. It'll feel cozier, especially in winter." "See?" She turned to her boyfriend triumphantly. I told you. They bought 3 gallons and left happy, and Daniel went back to stocking shelves, thinking about how easy it was to fix some problems. Pick the right paint, and your room feels better. But there was no paint color that fixed grief, no magic formula for reaching lost children or healing broken families. Sunday, he drove out to Harmony Heights with a bag of items he'd picked up from the dollar store. A new fidget toy, some textured fabric squares Ethan sometimes liked, a small container of bubbles because once, years ago, Ethan had laughed at bubbles. He found his son in the common room, but Ethan wasn't alone. Another resident, a girl maybe 16 or 17, sat near him, drawing in a sketchbook. She had Down syndrome and a smile that seemed permanent, even when focused on her art. That's Ethan, she said when she noticed Daniel. He likes the window. Yeah, he does. Daniel sat down carefully, not wanting to interrupt whatever dynamic had formed. I'm his dad. Daniel. I'm Katie. I draw pictures. She held up her sketchbook proudly. It was full of flowers, bright and cheerful, all labeled in careful handwriting. Those are beautiful. Thank you. I made one for Ethan, but he didn't look at it. She didn't sound upset about this, just matter of fact. He doesn't look at much. No, he doesn't. They sat together for a while, Katie drawing, Ethan rocking, Daniel just being present. It was strangely peaceful, this small moment of coexistence. Do you visit a lot? Katie asked, not looking up from her drawing. Every Sunday. That's nice. My mom comes on Saturdays. She added green to a stem, her tongue poking out in concentration. Do you think Ethan knows you're here? It was the question Daniel asked himself every week. I don't know. I hope so. I think he does. He rocks different when you're here, slower. Daniel looked at his son, tried to see what Katie saw. Maybe she was right. Maybe Ethan did recognize him on some level, even if he couldn't show it. He pulled out the fidget toy, set it on the table between them. Ethan's eyes flicked toward it, then away, then back. After a moment, his hand reached out, picked it up, began the repetitive motion of clicking and spinning. It was something, small, but something. See, Katie said, he likes it. You're a good dad. The words hit Daniel unexpectedly hard. He wasn't a good dad. A good dad would have his son at home, would have figured out how to provide the care Ethan needed. A good dad wouldn't be working 2 jobs just to afford a group home that medicated his son into compliance. But Katie said it with such simple certainty that Daniel almost believed her. He stayed until afternoon, until Ethan started getting agitated and needed space. On the drive home, Daniel thought about Nora and Claire, wondered if they had anyone like Katie in their lives, someone who saw them clearly, without judgment or expectation. Probably not. Rich kids didn't end up in group homes with other struggling people. They ended up in fancy private schools with therapists who charged $200 an hour and tutors who quit when things got difficult. He was done thinking about the Carrington girls. He'd been warned off, and he had enough sense to listen. That resolution lasted exactly 3 days. Wednesday night, Daniel was cleaning the executive floor when he heard shouting. Real shouting, not the controlled corporate disagreements he usually overheard. He paused outside a conference room and recognized Evelyn's voice, though he'd never heard it like this, raw and furious. I don't care what you think is appropriate, Henderson. This is my company, and I'll run it however I see fit. Your company is bleeding talent because you're impossible to work with. A man's voice, equally angry. Half the executive team is looking for exit strategies. Then let them leave. I'll replace them with people who actually want to be here. You can't replace everyone, Evelyn. At some point, you have to look at the common denominator. Get out of my building. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't handle any criticism without, I said get out! Daniel moved away quickly, not wanting to be caught eavesdropping. He heard a door slam, footsteps stomping toward the elevator. A man in an expensive suit stormed past without seeing him, face red with anger. Daniel continued his route, giving the conference room area a wide berth. But 20 minutes later, when he came back through, he heard a different sound. Quieter. Someone crying, trying to muffle it. He stopped, told himself to keep walking. It wasn't his business. He'd been explicitly ordered to stay away from anything involving Evelyn Carrington. But the crying continued, desperate and broken, and Daniel couldn't make himself leave. He knocked softly on the conference room door. "Ms. Carrington? Are you all right?" The crying stopped abruptly. A pause, then, "Go away." I heard shouting. I wanted to make sure. The door opened. Evelyn stood there, her face blotchy, mascara smeared, her carefully constructed composure completely shattered. She looked at him with eyes that were equal parts fury and desperation. "I told you to stay away from my family. You're not okay. I'm fine. Her voice cracked. "I'm fine." She wasn't fine. Daniel could see her trembling, could see the way she was holding herself together through sheer force of will. "Do you need me to call someone, your assistant, or—" "I don't need anything from you." But she didn't close the door, just stood there, this powerful CEO who'd been reduced to a person barely holding on. "Why are you still here?" "I work here." "No, I mean—" She gestured helplessly. "Why do you care? You don't know me. I threatened to have you fired. You were protecting your kids. I get it." Evelyn laughed, bitter and sharp. "I can't even protect them from myself. I'm destroying them, and I don't know how to stop." Daniel should leave, should walk away from this train wreck before he got pulled in deeper. But something about her brokenness called to his own. "The girls come here a lot," he said carefully. "To your office. I don't have anywhere else to put them. Maria can't work every night. The tutors quit, and I can't just stop working. The company needs me." "What do the girls need?" "I don't know." The words exploded out of her. "I've tried everything. Therapy, tutors, quality time. I've read every parenting book, followed every expert's advice, and nothing works. They hate me, and I don't blame them because I'm a terrible mother who chose her career over her children." "Did you choose your career over your children?" "I'm here, aren't I? At 10 o'clock at night arguing with board members while my daughters sit at home with a housekeeper." "Where else would they be?" Evelyn stared at him. "What?" "I'm asking where else they'd be. You said you don't have childcare. The tutors quit. You can't afford to stop working. So what's the alternative?" "I don't know. I should figure something out. She pressed her hands to her face. "I should be better at this." Daniel thought about all the times he'd had the same thought. All the times he'd stood outside Harmony Heights, hating himself for leaving Ethan there. Being a parent doesn't come with a manual. You just do the best you can with what you have. My best is destroying them. Is it? Or are they just grieving, and you don't know how to help because you're grieving too? The question hung in the air between them. Evelyn slowly lowered her hands, looking at him like she was seeing him for the first time. "Who are you?" she asked quietly. "Daniel Hayes, night janitor, single dad, guy who's probably overstepping again. You talked to Nora more than once. She was upset. She needed someone to listen. And you just, what, sat with her? Listened?" "Yeah." "Why?" Daniel considered the question. "Because I know what it feels like to be invisible, to hurt and have nobody notice. I couldn't walk past that." Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, smaller. "What did she tell you?" "That she feels like nobody wants her, that you're always working, that she misses her dad and misses you, even though you're still alive." Evelyn flinched like he'd hit her. "I'm not telling you this to hurt you," Daniel continued. "I'm telling you because those girls are screaming for help in the only way they know how, and you're so focused on fixing the problem that you're not hearing what they're actually saying." "Which is what?" "That they need you. Not a tutor, not a therapist, not a perfectly scheduled routine. They need their mom, messy and imperfect and present." "I don't know how to be that." "Neither did I. My wife died 3 years ago, and I had to figure out how to be both parents to a kid who was already struggling. I failed more than I succeeded." Daniel leaned against the doorframe, exhausted by his own honesty. "Still failing, honestly. My son lives in a group home because I couldn't handle him on my own. I see him once a week and spend the whole time wondering if he even remembers who I am." Evelyn studied him with red-rimmed eyes. "Then how do you keep going?" "I show up. That's all I know how to do. Show up even when it's hard, even when it feels pointless. Because the alternative is giving up, and I can't do that to him. I show up. I'm always showing up." "Physically, yeah. But are you present? When you're with them, are you actually there? Or are you thinking about work emails and board meetings?" Evelyn closed her eyes. Both. I'm always thinking about both. I can't turn it off. Then maybe that's the problem. Not that you're a bad mother, but that you're trying to be two people at once and doing neither one well. I can't just abandon the company. 3,000 people depend on me for their jobs. The shareholders will survive. You're not the only person who can run that company, but you're the only mom those girls have. You don't understand. If I step back, if I show any weakness, the board will use it against me. Forster's already questioning my focus. Henderson thinks I should take a leave of absence. If I give them an opening, then give them an opening, Daniel said. So what if you're not perfect? So what if they see you struggling? At least you'd be honest about it. The business world doesn't reward honesty. It rewards strength. What good is strength if you lose your daughters in the process? The question landed hard. Evelyn opened her mouth, closed it, then sank into one of the conference room chairs like her strings had been cut. I don't know what to do, she whispered. I'm so tired of not knowing what to do. Daniel understood that exhaustion intimately. He pulled out a chair and sat down across from her, maintaining distance but offering presence. The girls need stability, Evelyn continued. They need structure and routine, and they need to feel safe. They need to trust that you're not going anywhere, that you see them, that their feelings matter. How do I show them that when I don't even know what they're feeling? You ask, you listen, you sit with the discomfort of not having answers. Evelyn laughed weakly. I'm very bad at not having answers. Yeah, I noticed. They sat in silence for a moment. The building hummed around them, the ventilation system and distant elevator motors creating a white noise backdrop. Nora told me you have a son, Evelyn said. With autism? Severe autism, nonverbal, needs constant supervision. He's 14. That must be, she struggled for words. I can't imagine. You get used to it, the same way you get used to anything that doesn't kill you. Do you ever resent him for needing so much? The question was too honest, too raw. Daniel appreciated that she'd asked it anyway. Sometimes, not him exactly, but the situation. I resent that I can't give him what he needs, that I'm working 2 jobs and still can't afford to bring him home, that his mother died and left me alone to figure this out. He paused. But mostly I just miss him, miss who he might have been if his brain worked differently. That's how I feel about the girls. I miss who they were before Marcus died, before they locked themselves away. They're still those kids, just scared and hurt and not sure who to trust anymore. As Evelyn was quiet, processing, then, why are you being kind to me? I was horrible to you. You were protecting your kids. That's not horrible. That's human. I accused you of... She couldn't finish the sentence. I know, but you don't really think that, or you wouldn't be sitting here talking to me. I don't know what I think anymore. She rubbed her temples. Everything's falling apart. The merger's hitting problems, the board's turning on me. I can't find anyone to help with the girls, and I'm so far behind on everything that I can't see a way forward. Then stop trying to see the way forward. Just handle today. That's not how business works. This isn't business. This is your life. Evelyn looked at him, really looked, and something shifted in her expression. You should go. I've kept you from your work long enough. Daniel stood up. Are you going to be okay? Probably not, but I'll survive. That's what we do, right? Just survive until things get better. He recognized his own words to Nora, reflected back at him. Things will get better. Eventually. You don't know that. No, but I hope it anyway. He left her sitting in the conference room, staring at the empty chairs where her board members had been. In the hallway, he leaned against the wall for a moment, trying to shake the feeling that he'd just stepped into something much bigger and more complicated than he could handle. Then he went back to cleaning, because that's what he did. Emptied trash cans and wiped down desks and made invisible messes disappear, while the visible ones kept growing. The next morning, Evelyn woke up with a headache and a decision forming in her mind. She called an emergency meeting with her executive team and dropped a bomb that made them all go silent. I'm taking Fridays off, effective immediately. No calls, no emails, no emergencies unless the building is literally on fire. Her COO, Janet, spoke first. You're taking Fridays off? Every Friday? Yes. Ms. Carrington, we're in the middle of the Technova merger. The product launch is in 6 weeks. We can't afford. We'll manage. You're all perfectly capable of handling things for 1 day a week. Forrester leaned forward, smelling blood. This is exactly what I was talking about. You're distracted, making impulsive decisions. This isn't impulsive. This is me setting a boundary. I have 2 daughters who need me, and I'm going to start actually being there for them. Your personal life shouldn't impact. My personal life impacts everything, whether I acknowledge it or not. I've been pretending I can keep these things separate, and it's not working, so I'm choosing to be honest about it instead. The room was silent. Her team exchanged glances, clearly unsure how to respond. You'll have me Monday through Thursday, Evelyn continued. That's still more than most CEOs give. If you can't work within that, then maybe this isn't the right fit for you. She ended the meeting before anyone could argue further. In her office, she sat down and pulled out her phone, staring at the calendar app. Fridays. 1 day a week to figure out how to be a mother. It felt terrifyingly insufficient and impossibly generous at the same time. That afternoon, she left work at 5, an unheard-of early departure, and drove home to find Maria making dinner while the girls did homework at the kitchen table. I'm home, Evelyn announced, and both girls looked up in surprise. It's Wednesday, Nora said suspiciously. You're never home on Wednesday. I'm trying something new. I'm going to be home every Friday from now on. No work, just us. Claire and Nora exchanged a look that Evelyn couldn't read. Why? Claire asked. Because I haven't been present enough. I want to change that. For how long? Nora's voice was flat, defensive. What do you mean? How long until you decide it's not working and go back to normal? Because you always do this. You try something new for like a week, then give up when it gets hard. The accusation stung because it was true. Evelyn had started and abandoned countless initiatives over the past year. I'm not giving up this time. You say that now. Nora, just forget it, Mom. We don't need you to suddenly start caring. We've figured out how to manage without you. The words were designed to hurt, and they succeeded. Evelyn stood in her own kitchen, rejected by her 8-year-old daughter, while Maria quietly excused herself to give them privacy. I know I haven't been there, Evelyn said carefully. I know I've let you down, but I'm trying to fix that. You can't fix it, Claire said softly. Dad's still dead. We're still sad. You being home on Fridays doesn't change anything. Maybe not, but it's a start. We don't want to start. We want... Nora's voice broke. We just want you to actually see us, to notice when we're hurting, to care about something other than your stupid company for 5 minutes. I do care. I care more than where were you? Nora stood up, her hands shaking. Where were you when Dad died and we couldn't stop crying? Where were you when we had nightmares and woke up screaming? Where were you when the tutors quit and we felt like we were too broken for anyone to love us? I was trying to keep everything together. I was trying to... You were hiding. Nora was crying now, angry tears that she didn't try to wipe away. You were hiding at work because being there was easier than being here with us, seeing how much we were hurting, remembering that Dad was gone. Evelyn felt like she'd been slapped. That's not... Yes, it is. You're a coward, Mom. You run away from anything that's hard. That's enough, Nora. No, it's not enough. It's not nearly enough because you haven't heard anything we've been trying to tell you for a year. Nora grabbed her backpack. I'm going to my room, and you can have your stupid Fridays off, but don't expect us to suddenly act like everything's okay just because you feel guilty. She stormed upstairs. Claire sat at the table, tears running silently down her face. Claire, sweetheart. She's right, Claire whispered. You weren't there. You're still not there. Not really. You're just somewhere else. All the time. Then she got up and followed her sister, leaving Evelyn alone in the kitchen with the ruins of her good intentions. She sank into a chair and let herself cry, really cry, for the first time since Marcus's funeral. Great, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. Her daughters hated her. Her board was turning on her. Everything she'd built was crumbling, and she had no idea how to stop it. Her phone buzzed. A text from Janet. Board wants an emergency meeting tomorrow morning. Forrester's calling for a vote of no confidence. Of course he was. Of course this was the moment everything would fall apart. Evelyn looked at the text, then at the stairs where her daughters had disappeared. She thought about Daniel's words. What good is strength if you lose your daughters in the process? She typed a response. Tell them I'll be there Monday. I'm taking the rest of the week off. Janet's reply was immediate. That's not advisable. This is serious. So is my family. See you Monday. She turned off her phone and sat in the quiet kitchen, listening to the house settle around her. Upstairs, she could hear the faint sound of Nora crying, Claire trying to comfort her. Evelyn had no plan, no strategy, no clear path forward. She just knew that something had to change, even if it meant risking everything she'd worked for. She climbed the stairs slowly, each step feeling like a mile. At Nora's door, she raised her hand to knock, then hesitated. What could she possibly say that would make any of this better? But standing in the hallway wouldn't help either. So she knocked softly and pushed the door open. Both girls were on Nora's bed, Claire hugging her sister while Nora cried into a pillow. They looked up when Evelyn entered, their faces wary and hurt. I'm not here to defend myself, Evelyn said quietly. I'm here to listen. If you want to yell at me, yell. If you want to tell me everything I've done wrong, tell me. I'll sit here and I'll listen, and I won't make excuses. The girls stared at her, clearly not trusting this offer. I mean it, Evelyn continued. I've been so focused on fixing things that I haven't heard what you're actually trying to tell me. So I'm listening now. Really listening. Nora wiped her face with her sleeve. You're just going to sit there? If that's what you want, yes. What if we don't want to talk? Then I'll sit here anyway. I'll sit here until you're ready, even if that takes all night. Something flickered in Nora's expression. Hope, maybe, or just exhaustion. You'll probably get bored and leave. Try me. So Evelyn sat on the floor next to Nora's bed, her back against the wall, and waited. The minutes stretched out, uncomfortable and heavy. The girls whispered to each other, clearly deciding what to do. Finally, Claire spoke. Do you miss Dad? The question was so simple and so devastating. Every day. Then why don't you ever talk about him? Because it hurts too much. It hurts us too, Nora said. But we can't even mention him without you getting this look on your face like you want to run away. I know. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix it. You're right. It doesn't. Evelyn took a shaky breath. Your dad was the best person I knew. He made me laugh when I was stressed about work. He knew how to talk to people, how to make them feel seen. I was always the serious one, the driven one, and he balanced that out. Made me remember that life was supposed to be fun sometimes. The girls were quiet, listening. When he died, I didn't know how to be without him. I didn't know how to be a parent on my own, how to run the house, how to be enough for you when I'd never been enough before. He was the one who knew how to comfort you, how to make you smile. I just knew how to work. So you worked, Claire said softly. All the time. All the time, Evelyn agreed, because that's the only thing I knew how to do. And every time I looked at you, I saw him, and it hurt so much I couldn't breathe. Nora's anger had shifted into something else. We look like him? You have his smile, his eyes, the way you laugh, when you used to laugh. It sounds exactly like him. We miss him, Nora whispered. I know, baby. I miss him too. And we miss you, Claire added, the you that used to be there before. Evelyn climbed onto the bed and pulled both girls into her arms, and for once they didn't pull away. They clung to her, all three of them crying together, finally sharing the grief they'd been carrying separately for too long. It wasn't a fix. It wasn't even close to healing, but it was real and raw and honest in a way nothing had been for months. And in the morning, Evelyn would have to face the board and the company and all the consequences of choosing her daughters over her career. But right now, in this moment, she was exactly where she needed to be. They fell asleep like that, tangled together on Nora's bed. And when Evelyn woke up at 3 a.m. with a crick in her neck and Claire's elbow digging into her ribs, she didn't move. She just lay there in the dark, listening to her daughters breathe, feeling their warmth against her, and tried to remember the last time they'd been this close. Before Marcus died, probably. Before everything shattered. She must have dozed off again because the next thing she knew, pale morning light was filtering through the curtains, and both girls were awake, watching her with cautious expressions. Hi, Evelyn said, her voice rough from sleep. Hi, Claire whispered back. They stayed in bed for another hour, not really talking, just existing in the same space without the usual tension. Eventually, hunger drove them downstairs where Maria had already left for the day. A note on the counter saying she'd be back tomorrow. Evelyn stared at the refrigerator, mentally cataloging its contents and coming up blank. I could make eggs? You don't know how to make eggs, Nora said, but there was less hostility in her voice than usual. I can learn. How hard can it be? Harder than she thought, apparently. The first batch stuck to the pan and came out in rubbery chunks. The second batch she overcooked into brown leather. By the third attempt, she'd managed something vaguely egg-like, though calling them scrambled was generous. The girls ate without complaint, which felt like a minor miracle. These are terrible, Nora said, but she was almost smiling. They really are, Evelyn agreed. Your dad's pancakes were better, and those were truly awful. Remember the time he tried to flip one and it stuck to the ceiling? Claire asked. And he left it there for 3 days because he thought it was funny, Nora added, the memory softening her face. They spent the morning trading stories about Marcus, the good and the bad, the silly and the profound. It hurt, but in a different way than before, like lancing a wound that had been festering, painful but necessary. Around noon, Evelyn's phone started buzzing. She turned it back on to check the time and immediately regretted it. 17 missed calls from Janet. 23 emails flagged urgent. A text from the board chair. We need to talk, today. She looked at the phone, then at her daughters sitting across from her at the kitchen table. Work? Nora asked, her expression already closing off. Yeah. You should probably go deal with it. Evelyn set the phone face down on the table. It can wait until Monday. Mom, if it's important, you're important. Us being here together, this is important. She took a breath. I meant what I said. I'm taking Fridays off, and today I'm taking Thursday, too. They'll survive without me. The girls exchanged a look that held an entire conversation. Then Nora said, What if they fire you? Then they fire me. But the company's your whole life. No, Evelyn said firmly. You're my whole life. The company is just my job. It was the first time she'd said it out loud, and saying it made it feel true in a way it hadn't before. They spent the afternoon doing nothing much. Watched a movie the girls picked, one of those animated things with talking animals that Evelyn would normally find insufferable but somehow didn't mind today. Ordered pizza for dinner because none of them could face her cooking again. Played a board game that Claire dug out from a closet, something they hadn't touched since before Marcus died. It was simple and ordinary and felt like the most important thing Evelyn had done in months. That night, after tucking the girls in, actually tucking them in, sitting with each of them until they fell asleep, Evelyn finally looked at her phone. The messages were worse than she'd anticipated. The board had held an emergency meeting without her. Forrester had made his move, arguing that her recent behavior demonstrated an inability to lead effectively. Janet had defended her, but barely. The vote was scheduled for Monday morning. Evelyn sat on her bed, reading through the corporate carnage, and felt surprisingly calm. A year ago, this would have destroyed her. Hell, a week ago it would have destroyed her. But right now, with her daughters asleep down the hall, after actually talking to her, after sharing grief and terrible eggs and terrible television, she couldn't bring herself to care as much as she should. Let them vote. Let Forrester have his moment of triumph. She'd deal with it Monday. Friday morning, she woke to find both girls in her bed, curled up on either side of her like they used to do when they were small. When did you get here? She asked. Around 6, Claire said. We had bad dreams. Both of you? Nora nodded against her shoulder. Can we stay here? As long as you want. They stayed in bed until almost 9, talking quietly about nothing important. Then Evelyn made another disastrous attempt at breakfast. Pancakes this time, which somehow turned out worse than Marcus's had ever been. We should just accept that you can't cook, Nora said, poking at a blackened lump. Yeah, probably. Evelyn looked at the kitchen, at the mess she'd made. Want to go out for breakfast instead? They ended up at a diner near the house, the kind of place they'd never been to because Evelyn usually preferred upscale restaurants or staying home. But the girls loved it, piling their plates with hash browns and bacon while Evelyn picked at an omelet and tried to remember the last time they'd done something this normal. Mom, Claire said through a mouthful of toast, can I ask you something? Of course. The janitor at your building, the one who talked to Nora, why did you get so mad at him? Evelyn set down her fork. I was scared. I didn't know him, and he was talking to my daughter without my permission. But he was nice, Nora said. He just listened. That's all he did. I know, I overreacted. Are you going to apologize to him? The question caught Evelyn off guard. I don't know. Maybe. You should, Claire said firmly. It's not fair to be mean to someone just because you're scared. You're right. It's not fair. After breakfast, they went to a bookstore and let the girls pick out whatever they wanted. Then to a park where they sat on swings and talked about school, about tutors, about what they wanted to do differently. I don't want another tutor, Nora said. I want to go to actual school with other kids. You hated school before, Evelyn reminded her. I hated being away from Dad. But he's not coming back, so there's no point staying home waiting for him. The logic was devastating and mature beyond her years. Evelyn nodded. Okay, we'll look into schools. Real ones, not just tutors who quit. And can we stop doing therapy? Claire asked. The therapists never help. They just ask us how we feel and we say fine and everyone pretends it's useful. What would help? This, Claire said simply. Talking to you, being normal, not having every conversation be about feelings and grief and fixing us. You don't need fixing, Evelyn said. Then stop trying to fix us. It was a fair point. Evelyn had been so focused on solving the problem that she'd never stopped to ask what the girls actually needed. They spent the rest of the day just being together, no agenda, no structure. And it was hard. Evelyn kept catching herself checking her phone, thinking about work, planning ahead. But every time she did, one of the girls would say something or laugh at something, and she'd pull herself back to the present. By the time they got home that evening, exhausted and windblown from the park, Evelyn felt something she hadn't felt in over a year. Not happiness, exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. A sense that this, her daughters, this messy, imperfect family was worth fighting for. Saturday morning brought reality crashing back. Evelyn woke to find her phone exploding with messages. The story had leaked to the press somehow. CEO of major tech company facing vote of no confidence, board in crisis, company in turmoil. Her personal cell rang. It was her father calling from Boston where he'd retired 5 years ago. Evelyn, what the hell is going on? I'm seeing your company all over the financial news. It's complicated, Dad. Complicated? They're saying you've abandoned your post, that you're having some kind of breakdown. I'm not having a breakdown. I'm taking time off to be with my daughters. Since when? You've never taken time off in your life. Since I realized my children were falling apart, and I was too busy to notice. Her father was quiet for a moment. Then, is this about Marcus? It's about everything. The girls, the company, me trying to be something I'm not. You're one of the most successful CEOs in the country. You can't just walk away from that. I'm not walking away. I'm setting boundaries. Boundaries are for people who have the luxury of failure. You built that company from nothing. You can't let them take it from you. Evelyn closed her eyes, feeling the familiar pressure of her father's expectations. He'd never understood why she married Marcus, why she'd wasted time having children when she should have been focused on her career. And when Marcus died, her father's version of comfort had been to tell her to throw herself into work, that grief was weakness. I have to go, Dad. The girls are waiting for me. Evelyn, she hung up and turned off her phone. Downstairs, Nora and Claire were eating cereal and watching cartoons. Normal Saturday morning activities that Evelyn had missed so many times she'd lost count. Everything okay? Nora asked, picking up on her tension. Work stuff. Nothing I can't handle. But could she? The vote was Monday. If the board removed her, she'd lose the company she'd built, the reputation she'd spent 20 years cultivating. Everything she'd sacrificed for would be gone. And the scary part was that she wasn't sure she cared as much as she should. Mom? Claire was looking at her with concern. You have that face again. What face? The one where you're somewhere else, even though you're standing right here. Evelyn shook herself back to the present. Sorry, I'm here. What are we doing today? Can we go to the Science Museum? Claire asked hopefully. Dad used to take us there. The request was loaded with meaning, returning to a place that held memories of Marcus, choosing to remember rather than avoid. Yeah, Evelyn said. Let's go to the Science Museum. They spent hours there, the girls dragging her from exhibit to exhibit, pointing out things Marcus had explained to them, sharing memories without the usual pain. Evelyn watched them come alive in a way they hadn't in months, their enthusiasm tentative but real. In the planetarium, during a show about distant galaxies, Claire reached over and took Evelyn's hand, just held it, in the dark, while stars wheeled across the dome above them. It was such a small gesture, but it felt like forgiveness. That night, Evelyn made the decision she'd been avoiding. She called Janet, her COO, the one person on her executive team she truly trusted. "I need you to be honest with me," Evelyn said. "If the board votes me out on Monday, can you hold the company together?" Janet was quiet for a long moment. "Is that what you want? To let them win?" "I'm asking if you can do it." "I can do it. I've been doing most of it already, if I'm being honest." "You've been distracted for months." The truth stung, but Evelyn didn't argue. "If I step down voluntarily before the vote, will you take over as CEO?" "Evelyn, what are you—" "Just answer the question." "Yes, I'd take it. But you don't have to do this. We can fight Forrester, we can—" "I don't want to fight anymore," Evelyn said quietly. "I'm tired, Janet. I'm tired of pretending I can do everything, be everything. And my daughters need me more than the company does." "What about what you need?" Evelyn looked through the doorway at her daughters, sprawled on the couch together, arguing over what to watch. "This is what I need. I just didn't know it until I almost lost it." "So you're really doing this? Just walking away from everything you built?" "I'm not walking away. I'm choosing something different." Evelyn took a breath. "Draft a resignation letter. I'll review it tomorrow and send it Sunday night. That way the board doesn't have to vote on Monday. They get what they want and I get to leave on my terms. They don't deserve that. They should have to own the decision to remove you." "Maybe, but this isn't about what they deserve. It's about what I can live with." After she hung up, Evelyn sat in the silence of her bedroom, processing what she'd just done. 20 years of her life gone with a phone call. The company she'd nurtured from a startup to a billion-dollar enterprise, handed over to someone else. She waited for the panic to hit, the regret, the voice screaming that she'd made a terrible mistake. Instead, she felt lighter, like she'd been carrying a weight she didn't realize was crushing her until she set it down. Sunday passed in a blur of normalcy. They made a terrible attempt at baking cookies that ended with flour everywhere and smoke coming from the oven. Played games, watched more movies, existed together without the constant pressure of grief or expectation. That night, after the girls were asleep, Evelyn reviewed the resignation letter Janet had drafted. It was professional, gracious, gave the right reasons without admitting weakness. She read it 3 times, then signed it and scheduled it to send at midnight. At 11:59, she watched the clock tick over, watched the email disappear from her drafts folder into the sent folder. It was done. Her phone started ringing within minutes. She turned it off and went to bed, sleeping more soundly than she had in months. Monday morning, she woke to both girls in her bed again. "Shouldn't you be at work?" Nora asked. "I quit." Both girls sat up, staring at her. "What?" "I resigned. Sent the letter last night. I'm not the CEO anymore." "But—" Claire looked stunned. "That was your whole life." "No, you're my whole life. The company was just taking up space where you should have been." "But Mom, you can't just quit your job because of us," Nora said, and she sounded scared. "What if you resent us later? What if—" "I won't. This is the right choice. I know it is." "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," Evelyn admitted. "Figure out how to be your mom again. Maybe consult for other companies. Write a book. Learn to cook without setting off the smoke alarm." The girls looked at each other, then back at her. "Are you sure?" Claire asked quietly. "I'm sure." They spent the day at home, Evelyn fielding calls she didn't answer and emails she didn't read. The media was having a field day. CEO's shocking resignation, board crisis at Carrington Industries, what went wrong. But she didn't care. Let them speculate. She knew the truth. That evening, she was making another disastrous attempt at dinner when the doorbell rang. The girls were in the living room, and Evelyn was wrist-deep in something that was supposed to be lasagna, but looked more like a culinary crime scene. "Can someone get that?" she called out. She heard Nora open the door, then a voice that made Evelyn freeze. "Oh, hi. Is your mom home?" "Daniel, the janitor from her building, here at her house." Evelyn wiped her hands on a towel and walked to the front door, where Nora stood talking to Daniel like they were old friends. I'm sorry to just show up, Daniel said when he saw Evelyn. I tried calling your office, but they said you don't work there anymore. I needed to. He stopped, clearly uncomfortable. Can I talk to you for a minute? How did you find my address? Phone book. There's only one E. Carrington in Queen Anne. Evelyn should tell him to leave, should maintain the boundaries she'd set. But something about the way he was standing there, clearly nervous, clearly here for a reason, made her step aside. Come in. He followed her into the kitchen, where the lasagna disaster was congealing in the pan. Daniel glanced at it, and Evelyn saw the corner of his mouth twitch. Don't say anything, she warned. Wasn't going to. They stood there awkwardly for a moment. Then Daniel said, I heard you resigned from the CEO position. News travels fast. It's all over the financial sites. They're calling it a breakdown. Of course they are. Is it? A breakdown? Evelyn considered the question. More like a breakthrough. I finally figured out what actually matters. Daniel nodded slowly. The girls. The girls. That took courage. Walking away from all that. Or stupidity. Ask me again in 6 months which one it was. I think you know already. Evelyn leaned against the counter, studying him. Why are you here, Daniel? He took a breath. Because I need your help. And I know that sounds crazy, coming to you when your life is falling apart. But I don't have anyone else to ask. Help with what? Ethan. My son. The group home he's at, they're closing down. Some licensing issue, I don't understand all of it, but they're relocating the residents to other facilities, and the one they want to send Ethan to is 2 hours away. I won't be able to visit every week. I can barely afford to keep him where he is now, and this new place costs more, and He stopped, visibly struggling. I don't know what to do. Evelyn saw the desperation in his face, the same helplessness she'd been feeling for months. When do they want to move him? End of the week. I tried to find somewhere closer, but everywhere's full or too expensive or both. How much would it cost to keep him somewhere local, somewhere good? More than I make in a year, probably 2 years. Evelyn thought about the severance package the board would have to give her, the stock options she'd cashed out, the savings she'd accumulated over decades of choosing work over everything else, money she'd always thought she'd need for security, for independence, for proving she didn't need anyone, money that could actually help someone who needed it. What if I helped you pay for it? She heard herself say. Daniel stared at her. What? I have money. More than I need, honestly. What if I helped cover the cost of a better facility for Ethan? I can't. That's not... Why would you do that? Because you helped my daughters when I couldn't. Because you sat with them when they were crying and made them feel seen. Because... She paused. Because sometimes people need help, and if I can give it, why wouldn't I? That's too much. I can't accept that. Why not? Because I'm nobody to you. I'm just the guy who cleans your building. You're the person who showed me what it looks like to actually care about kids who aren't your own, who made my daughters feel heard when I was too scared to listen. Evelyn crossed her arms. Let me do this, please. Daniel looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said, There's something else. The group home. They think I might have had something to do with the licensing violations. Evelyn felt ice slide down her spine. What? One of the staff members got fired a few months ago. She was rough with the residents, including Ethan. I filed a complaint about her. Now she's telling people I made false accusations to get her fired, that I've been harassing her, that I'm... He couldn't finish the sentence. They're investigating. If they find against me, I could lose visitation rights. Could lose Ethan completely. That's insane. You're his father. I'm also someone who filed a complaint against an employee who's now claiming I'm dangerous. And I work alone at night in a building full of people who don't pay attention to me. No alibi, no witnesses, just my word against hers. What does she want? I think she wants money to drop the accusations, but I don't have any to give her. Evelyn's mind shifted into the strategic mode she'd honed over 20 years of business. Do you have documentation of the original complaint? Some. Not enough, probably. Get me everything you have, dates, times, witnesses to her behavior, and give me her name. I'll handle it. Ms. Carrington, Evelyn, and I said I'll handle it. She softened her tone. You helped my family. Let me help yours. From the living room, Nora called out, "Mom, something's burning!" The lasagna. Evelyn had forgotten about the lasagna. She rushed to pull it from the oven while Daniel followed, and both girls appeared in the doorway. "Hey, Daniel," Nora said, genuinely happy to see him. "Hey, kiddo, how are you doing?" "Better. Mom quit her job to hang out with us." "I heard. That's pretty cool of her." "We're still deciding if it's cool or crazy," Claire added, "but the food's definitely gotten worse." They all looked at the charred disaster in the pan. "I could order pizza," Evelyn offered. "Again?" Nora made a face. "I'm sorry I can't cook. Your father got those genes and forgot to pass them on to me." "Daniel, can you cook?" Claire asked hopefully. He smiled, the expression transforming his tired face. "I can make a few things. Nothing fancy." "Anything's better than Mom's lasagna." "Hey," Evelyn protested, but she was smiling too. An hour later, Daniel had somehow created an actual edible dinner from the chaos of Evelyn's kitchen. Scrambled eggs that weren't rubber, toast that wasn't burned, bacon that was actually crispy. Simple breakfast for dinner, but it tasted like a miracle. They ate together at the kitchen table, the girls peppering Daniel with questions about Ethan, about his work, about everything. He answered patiently, and Evelyn watched the easy way he talked to them, how he never talked down or dismissed their questions. This was what they'd needed all along. Not tutors or therapists or structured activities. Just someone who saw them as people, who listened without trying to fix everything. After dinner, while the girls cleared the table, Daniel said quietly, "Thank you for the offer. I'll bring you the documentation tomorrow." "Bring Ethan too," Evelyn said impulsively. "What?" "Bring your son. Let the girls meet him. Let them see what you're fighting for." Daniel hesitated. "He doesn't do well with new people, new situations." "Then we'll make it comfortable for him. We have a big backyard, it's quiet. Just think about it." That night, after Daniel left and the girls were in bed, Evelyn sat in her home office and started making calls. She had connections, favors owed, people who would help because she'd helped them once. By midnight, she had the name of a lawyer who specialized in disability rights and a private investigator who could look into the staff member making accusations. She was good at this, solving problems, mobilizing resources, making things happen. The difference was that this time she was fighting for something that actually mattered. Her phone buzzed with a text from Janet. "Board accepted your resignation. Press release goes out tomorrow. You're officially free." Free. The word should terrify her. Instead, it felt like possibility. Tuesday morning arrived with rain hammering against the windows, the kind of relentless Seattle downpour that turned the world gray and blurred. Evelyn woke to find both girls already up, sitting at the kitchen table with serious expressions. "We need to talk," Nora said, and Evelyn's stomach dropped at the formal tone. "Okay, what's going on?" "Are we the reason you quit?" Claire asked. "Because if we are, that's not fair to you." Evelyn sat down across from them, trying to find the right words. "You're part of the reason, yes, but not the way you think." "Then how?" "I quit because I was failing at everything. The company, being your mom, being a person. I was spread so thin that nothing was getting what it deserved." She reached across the table, stopped just short of touching their hands. "You didn't make me quit. You made me realize what I'd been missing." "But what if you regret it?" Nora's voice was small. "What if you wake up in a year and hate us for it?" "That's not going to happen." "You don't know that." "You're right. I don't. But I know that for the past year, I've been living like a ghost, going through the motions while everything real slipped past me. And I'm tired of being a ghost in my own life." The girls were quiet, processing. Rain continued its assault on the windows, filling the silence. "Daniel's coming over today," Evelyn said, changing the subject. "With his son. I thought you might want to meet Ethan." "The boy with autism?" Claire asked. "Yes. Daniel says he doesn't do well with new people, so we need to be patient. No pressure, no expectations. Just be yourselves." "What if we mess up?" Nora asked. "What if we say something wrong or scare him?" "Then we'll apologize and try again. That's how this works." They spent the morning preparing, Evelyn calling the lawyer she'd found to discuss Daniel's case, while the girls cleaned up the living room and argued about which books Ethan might like. "He's 14, Nora said. He's not going to want picture books. Daniel said he doesn't talk. Maybe he likes the pictures. That's not how it works. How do you know? You've never met anyone with autism. Neither have you. Evelyn listened to them bicker, the sound somehow comforting. Normal sibling arguments about normal things, not the loaded silences or bitter accusations that had defined the past year. The lawyer, a woman named Patricia Chen, called back within an hour. I looked into the staff member making accusations against your friend. She has a history. 3 previous complaints at other facilities, all settled quietly. This is a pattern. Can we use that? If she's attempting extortion, yes, but we need to be careful. Disability rights cases are complicated, and fathers already face an uphill battle maintaining custody of special needs children. What do we need to prove? That Mr. Hayes is a fit parent acting in his son's best interest. That the original complaint was legitimate. That the current accusations are retaliatory and false. Patricia paused. It would help if we could demonstrate he has a support system. Single fathers with limited resources often lose these cases simply because the system doesn't believe they can manage alone. After hanging up, Evelyn sat thinking about support systems and what they meant. She'd never had one, had always prided herself on not needing help. And look where that had gotten her. Daniel arrived at 2, driving a beat-up Honda with rust eating through the wheel wells. Ethan sat in the passenger seat, wearing headphones and staring straight ahead. Evelyn met them at the door with the girls hovering behind her. Come in, please. Daniel looked nervous, his usual careful composure slipping. He's having a rough day. If this is too much, we can leave. It's fine. Whatever he needs. Ethan entered the house slowly, his movements stiff and uncertain. He was small for 14, with Daniel's dark hair and eyes that seemed to look everywhere and nowhere at once. The headphones stayed on, blocking out the world. This is my son, Ethan, Daniel said quietly. Ethan, this is Ms. Carrington and her daughters, Nora and Claire. Ethan didn't acknowledge the introduction. His hands flapped briefly at his sides, then stilled. Hi, Ethan, Nora said gently. Do you want to sit down? We have books, if you like books. No response. He can hear you, Daniel said. He processes differently. They moved to the living room, Ethan gravitating immediately to the window. He stood there, rocking slightly, his focus locked on something outside that only he could see. What is he like? Claire asked Daniel. Textures, repetitive motions, sometimes bubbles, though we haven't tried those in a while. Daniel sat on the edge of the couch, watching his son with an expression that mixed love and helplessness. Mostly he likes routine, same things, same order, every day. That sounds exhausting, Nora said, then looked horrified. Sorry, I didn't mean… It's okay. It is exhausting. Evelyn watched the girls approach Ethan carefully, not too close, giving him space. Claire held out one of the textured fabric squares Daniel had mentioned, just within his peripheral vision. Ethan's eyes flicked toward it, then away, then back. Slowly, so slowly his hand reached out and took it. He rubbed it between his fingers, the repetitive motion seeming to calm him. That's good, Daniel said quietly. That's really good. They spent the afternoon in careful silence, Ethan at the window with his textures, the girls reading nearby but not intruding, Daniel and Evelyn talking in low voices about lawyers and facilities and the accusations hanging over his head. The investigator found 3 witnesses who saw the staff member being rough with residents, Evelyn said, including one instance with Ethan. They're willing to testify. Daniel closed his eyes. I didn't know there were witnesses. I thought it was just my word against hers. There's more. She tried this before at a previous facility, made accusations against a parent who complained about her, then dropped them when the facility paid her off. So this is just, what, a shakedown? Looks like it. It's like Patricia thinks we can get the accusations dismissed and possibly get her investigated for extortion. Why are you doing this? Daniel asked, and there was no suspicion in his voice, just genuine confusion. You don't owe me anything. Evelyn looked at her daughters, sitting on the floor with books spread around them, occasionally glancing at Ethan to make sure he was okay. You taught them something I couldn't. You showed them that being seen matters more than being fixed. That's worth more than money. I just talked to them. You listened. There's a difference. At 4, Ethan started getting agitated, his rocking becoming more pronounced, his hands flapping harder. We should go, Daniel said quickly. He needs his routine, and we're past his usual time. But as they moved toward the door, something unexpected happened. Claire approached Ethan slowly and held out a small toy, one of those infinity cubes that Daniel had mentioned. For you, she said softly. If you want it. Ethan's hand stopped flapping. He looked at the cube, then at Claire, and for just a second their eyes met. Then he took the cube and followed his father to the door, the moment already passed but not forgotten. After they left, Nora said, "He's like us." "What do you mean?" "Stuck inside his own head, trying to deal with stuff he can't explain, just doing it differently than we do." Evelyn hadn't thought about it that way, but Nora was right. Different circumstances, same fundamental struggle. Everyone trying to survive their own version of broken. The next few days fell into a pattern. Mornings with the girls, afternoons coordinating Daniel's legal defense, evenings trying and failing to cook dinner. Evelyn hired Patricia Chen, funded the investigation, and used every connection she had to push the case forward. The former staff member's lawyer called on Friday, offering to drop the accusations if Daniel would sign a non-disclosure agreement and pay a settlement. "Absolutely not," Patricia said when Evelyn relayed the offer. "That's admission of wrongdoing. We have enough to bury her claim and possibly bring charges. Tell them we'll see them in court." Evelyn delivered the message, feeling a fierce satisfaction at finally using her strategic skills for something that mattered. Meanwhile, Daniel started coming by the house more often, sometimes with Ethan, sometimes alone. The girls gravitated toward him naturally, asking questions about his work, about Ethan, about his wife who'd died. He answered honestly, never sugarcoating, but never overwhelming them either. One evening, while making another disastrous dinner attempt, Evelyn asked him, "How do you do it? Stay so calm when everything's falling apart?" Daniel was helping, well, mostly preventing her from burning the house down, and he paused, considering the question. "I don't stay calm, I panic constantly. I just do it quietly where Ethan can't see." He took the smoking pan from her hands. "You're burning the garlic again." "I always burn the garlic." "Oh, because you turns the heat too high and walk away." "I get distracted." "I noticed." He dumped the burnt garlic and started over. "The trick is staying present, watching what you're doing instead of thinking about what comes next." "That's harder than it sounds." "Everything worth doing is." The girls wandered in, drawn by the smell of actual edible food. "Are you going to teach Mom to cook?" Nora asked hopefully. "I'm going to try. No promises, though." "We should probably lower our expectations," Claire said, eyeing Evelyn's previous attempts congealing in the sink. They ate together, the four of them, and it felt natural in a way that surprised Evelyn. This man who'd been a stranger a month ago now felt like part of their small, fractured family. After dinner, while Daniel helped the girls with dishes, Evelyn's phone rang. Janet, her former COO. "How's retirement treating you?" Janet asked, amusement in her voice. "I'm not retired. I'm just between things." "Right. Well, your between things is making waves. The board's stock value dropped 12% after your resignation. Turns out investors liked having you at the helm." "That's their problem now." "True. But I'm calling because I have a proposition." Evelyn listened as Janet outlined an idea. Consulting work, helping other companies develop leadership pipelines, teaching CEOs how to scale without sacrificing their humanity. "You're uniquely qualified," Janet said. "You built one of the most successful companies in the industry, and you had the courage to walk away when it stopped serving you. People want to learn from that." "I don't know if I'm ready." "Think about it. Part-time, your own schedule, actually making a difference instead of just making money." Janet paused. "And it pays well, really well." After hanging up, Evelyn sat with the offer, turning it over in her mind. Could she do that? Help others avoid the mistakes she'd made? "Mom?" Nora appeared in the doorway. "Daniel's leaving. Want to say goodbye." Evelyn found him at the front door, jacket on, keys in hand. "Thank you," she said, "for tonight, for all of this." "I should be thanking you. The lawyer you hired, Patricia, called me today. The staff member's backing down, dropped all the accusations, resigned from her position. It's over." Relief flooded through Evelyn. "That's incredible." "It wouldn't have happened without you." Daniel looked at her seriously. "You saved my son's placement, probably saved my relationship with him." I don't know how to repay that. You already did. You helped my girls when I couldn't. I just listened. Exactly. He left, and Evelyn stood in the doorway watching his taillights disappear down the street, feeling something shift in her chest. Not romance. She wasn't ready for that. Might never be ready again. But connection. Recognition. Two broken people helping each other stay standing. The following week, Daniel came over with news. He'd found a facility for Ethan, a good one, close enough for daily visits. The cost was still beyond what he could afford alone, but Evelyn had already arranged a trust fund to cover the difference. I can't accept that much, he'd protested when she first suggested it. Yes, you can. And you will, because Ethan deserves the best care available, and you deserve not to work yourself to death trying to provide it. He'd argued, but eventually accepted, his gratitude mixed with the discomfort of receiving help he couldn't repay. On moving day, Evelyn and the girls came along to help. The new facility was beautiful, modern, clean, with specialized staff who actually seemed to care. Ethan's room had windows overlooking a garden, textured walls he could run his hands along, space for all his routines. Watching Daniel settle his son in, Evelyn saw the weight lift from his shoulders. The years of exhaustion ease just slightly. He'd never stop worrying, never stop fighting for Ethan, but at least he wouldn't have to fight alone anymore. Thank you, he said again, and Evelyn shook her head. Stop thanking me. We're helping each other. That's what people do. Spring arrived slowly, the gray Seattle winter giving way to tentative green. The girls enrolled in a local private school, nervous but ready. Evelyn started taking consulting clients, working from home, setting strict boundaries about her availability. And Daniel transitioned from night janitor to day maintenance supervisor at a different building, better hours and better pay. He came by the house most evenings, sometimes to help with dinner, sometimes just to talk. The girls adored him. He taught Nora how to fix a leaky faucet, showed Claire how to build a birdhouse. He was patient and present in ways that reminded Evelyn painfully of Marcus, but different too. His own person, his own kind of steadiness. One evening in April, after the girls had gone to bed, Evelyn and Daniel sat on the back porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Can I ask you something? Evelyn said. Sure. Do you ever stop feeling guilty for not being enough? Daniel was quiet for a moment. No, but you learn to carry it differently. Less like punishment, more like, I don't know, motivation, maybe, to do better tomorrow than you did today. I keep thinking about all the time I wasted, all the moments with the girls I missed because I was too busy being important. You can't get those back. I know. But you can make different choices now. That's worth something. They sat in companionable silence, the evening settling around them. Janet offered me consulting work, Evelyn said, teaching other CEOs about work-life balance, which is hilarious considering my track record. What did you say? I said yes, part-time, very part-time, because I'm good at business strategy and maybe I can help other people avoid my mistakes. That's great. Is it? Sometimes I feel like a fraud, like I'm profiting from my failures. You're using what you learned to help others. That's not fraud, that's wisdom. Evelyn looked at him, this man who'd been invisible to her for years, who'd turned out to be exactly what her family needed. How did you get so smart? Years of screwing up and learning from it. Yeah, me too. Summer brought changes. The girls thrived at school, making friends, bringing home stories and artwork and occasional behavior reports. They still had hard days, still cried for Marcus, still struggled with the reality of growing up without him. But they were learning to talk about it, to share the pain instead of carrying it alone. Evelyn's consulting business grew beyond what she'd expected. Executives from across the country wanted her insight, her honesty about the cost of ambition. She found herself actually enjoying the work, the teaching, the sense of contributing without consuming. And Daniel became part of their family in ways none of them discussed, but everyone understood. He was there for dinner most nights, helped with homework, fixed things around the house that Evelyn didn't know were broken. Ethan came too, settling into their chaos with his headphones and his textures, occasionally making eye contact, once even humming along when Claire played piano. On the anniversary of Marcus's death, they all went to the cemetery together. Evelyn, the girls, Daniel, and Ethan. It was the first time Evelyn had been able to visit without falling apart, the first time the girls could talk about their father without drowning in grief. "I miss him," Nora said, standing by the headstone. "But I'm not angry anymore that he left us." "He didn't leave you," Evelyn said gently. "He died. There's a difference." "I know. I used to think he chose to go, like he wanted to get away from us, but that's stupid." "It's not stupid. It's how grief works sometimes. We blame people for things they couldn't control because it's easier than accepting we're powerless." They stood together, remembering, and for the first time the memories didn't hurt quite so much as they comforted. On the way home, Ethan had a meltdown. Too much change, too much emotion he couldn't process. He screamed and hit himself and tried to run into traffic before Daniel caught him. The girls watched with wide eyes as Daniel held his son, not restraining but containing, speaking in low, calm tones until Ethan's panic subsided into exhausted crying. "Is he okay?" Claire asked quietly. "He will be," Daniel said, and he sounded completely wrecked. "He just needs time." They got Ethan into the car, drove him to his facility where familiar routines could soothe what words couldn't fix. The girls were quiet the whole way, processing what they'd seen. Later that night, Nora said, "Daniel's son really struggles, huh?" "Yeah, he does." "But Daniel doesn't give up on him." "No, he doesn't. Even though it's hard and scary and Ethan can't tell him what's wrong." Evelyn saw where this was going. "Even though all of that, yes." "That's what you're doing with us," Claire said softly. "Not giving up even though we make it hard. You're my daughters. Giving up was never an option. It felt like you gave up, before." "I know, and I'm sorry for that." Evelyn pulled them both close. "But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." Fall arrived with its usual rain and falling leaves. The girls started 4th grade, Evelyn took on more consulting clients, and Daniel got promoted to facilities manager. Slowly, painfully, they built something new from the pieces of their broken lives. It wasn't perfect. Evelyn still overworked sometimes, still struggled to turn off her strategic brain and just be present. The girls still had hard days, still pushed her away when grief overwhelmed them. Daniel still carried guilt about Ethan, still worked too hard trying to make up for what he couldn't provide. But they showed up for each other. Day after day, through the mess and mistakes and moments of grace. They learned to ask for help, to accept it when offered, to admit when they were struggling instead of pretending everything was fine. One evening in October, the whole group was at Evelyn's house for dinner. She'd actually managed to cook pasta without burning it, which felt like a monumental achievement. Ethan sat at the table with his headphones on, methodically organizing his food by color. The girls were arguing about something from school. Daniel was helping Evelyn set the table. "This is nice," he said quietly. "What is?" "This. All of us together. Feels like family." Evelyn looked around at the chaos. The girls bickering, Ethan lining up his peas, Daniel's easy presence in her kitchen. A year ago, she would have called this failure. Her company gone, her career redirected, her perfectly controlled life replaced by this messy, unpredictable reality. Now she called it home. "Yeah," she said, "it does." They ate dinner together, talking and laughing and navigating Ethan's needs and the girls' endless energy. It wasn't the family Evelyn had planned, wasn't the life she'd imagined when she married Marcus and started building her empire. It was something else entirely, something smaller and quieter and infinitely more real. After dinner, while doing dishes, Nora asked Daniel, "Do you think you'll ever get married again?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implications. Daniel glanced at Evelyn, who suddenly found the dish soap fascinating. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I loved your mom, Ethan's mom, Sarah. Losing her nearly destroyed me. I'm not sure I'm ready to risk that again." "But don't you get lonely?" "Sometimes, but I have Ethan, and I have you guys. That helps." "We're not your real family, though." "Family isn't just blood," Daniel said. "It's the people who show up when things get hard and stick around anyway." Later, after everyone had gone home and the girls were asleep, Evelyn sat in her bedroom thinking about Daniel's words. Family is the people who show up. She'd been so focused on the family she'd lost, Marcus, her career, the version of herself who had everything under control, that she'd almost missed the family she was building. Not perfect, not what she'd planned, but real and present and worth every sacrifice it had cost her. 2 years after Marcus died, 3 years after Sarah died, they held a small ceremony in Evelyn's backyard. Not a wedding. Neither Daniel nor Evelyn were ready for that, might never be ready, but a commitment to keep showing up for each other, to build this strange blended family of broken people learning to be whole. The girls stood with them, Nora reading something she'd written about chosen family and second chances. Ethan was there too, headphones on, rocking slightly, occasionally making a sound that might have been approval or might have been coincidence. A few friends attended, Patricia the lawyer and Janet, the former COO, people who'd witnessed their struggles and supported them through it. There was no minister, no formal vows, just honest words about grief and healing and choosing to hope even when it felt impossible. "I can't promise to be perfect," Evelyn said to Daniel, to the girls, to Ethan, to all of them. "I can't promise I won't mess up or work too hard or forget to be present sometimes, but I promise to try. To show up, even when it's hard. To choose this, all of you, over everything else." "I promise the same," Daniel said. "And to help Evelyn learn to cook, though that might be my biggest challenge yet." The girls laughed, and even Evelyn smiled. They planted a tree together in the backyard, all of them taking turns with the shovel. A Japanese maple that would change colors with the seasons, shedding its leaves and growing new ones, dying and being reborn year after year, like them. Like all of them. That night, after everyone had left and the house was quiet, Evelyn stood at her bedroom window looking out at the newly planted tree. The girls were asleep down the hall. Daniel had driven Ethan back to his facility, and the world felt simultaneously vast and intimate. Her phone buzzed. A text from Nora. "Are you awake?" "Yes. Everything okay? Can we come to your room?" Minutes later, both girls appeared in her doorway wearing their pajamas, looking younger than their 10 years. "Can we sleep here tonight?" Claire asked. "Like we used to?" They climbed into bed together, the three of them, and Evelyn held her daughters close while they talked about everything and nothing. About school and friends and Daniel and Ethan and the tree they'd planted and what they wanted to be when they grew up. "I want to be a teacher," Claire said, "so I can help kids who are struggling. I want to build things," Nora added, "like Dad did, but also help people like Ethan who can't speak for themselves." Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes. "Your dad would be so proud of you both." "Do you think he knows?" Nora asked. "About Daniel and Ethan and everything?" "I think," Evelyn paused, choosing her words carefully, "I think wherever he is, he's happy that we're not alone anymore, that we found people who care about us." "Daniel's not trying to replace Dad," Claire said firmly. "No, he's not. He's just himself, and that's enough." They fell asleep like that, tangled together. And when Evelyn woke in the morning to find them still there, still close, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. The months that followed brought their own challenges. Ethan had setbacks, days where he regressed and couldn't be reached. The girls struggled at school, dealing with normal kid problems and the not-so-normal weight of grief. Evelyn took on too many clients and had to pull back. Daniel's car broke down and money got tight despite Evelyn's help. But they faced it together. Daniel taught Evelyn how to change a tire, and she taught him how to negotiate a raise. The girls learned to advocate for Ethan when he visited, creating quiet spaces and bringing his favorite textures. They became fluent in each other's needs, each other's struggles. And slowly, so slowly it was almost imperceptible, the sharp edges of their grief softened into something bearable. Not gone, never gone, but integrated. Part of who they were instead of the only thing they were. 5 years after that night when Nora had hidden under a table crying and Daniel had sat with her in a dark hallway, the girls graduated from middle school. Ethan was there, 18 now, still nonverbal but more settled in his routines. Daniel sat next to Evelyn, their hands linked, watching Nora and Claire accept awards for academic achievement and community service. After the ceremony, surrounded by other families taking photos and celebrating, Claire said, "Remember when we thought everything was ruined forever?" "Yeah," Nora said. "That was stupid." "Not stupid," Evelyn corrected. "You were grieving. You were allowed to feel like the world was ending." "But it didn't end," Claire pointed out. "It just changed." "Into something different," Nora agreed. "Not better or worse, just Just different. That night, at dinner, which Evelyn had successfully cooked without burning anything, Daniel raised his glass of water in a toast. To different, he said. To different, they all echoed, even Ethan in his own way, tapping his glass against the table in his specific rhythm. And Evelyn looked around at her strange, imperfect, beautiful family. The daughters she'd almost lost to grief. The man she'd almost missed because he was invisible. The boy who'd taught them all that love doesn't require words, and felt overwhelming gratitude for every mistake that had led her here. She'd lost a company, a career, a version of herself she'd spent 20 years building. She'd lost Marcus, lost the life they'd planned, lost the illusion of control. But she'd gained something more valuable. She'd learned that strength isn't about never breaking. It's about breaking and choosing to rebuild differently. It's about showing up, even when you don't have answers. It's about being seen in your weakness instead of hiding in your strength. She'd learned that family isn't just the people you're born to or legally bound to. It's the people who sit with you in hallways when you're crying, who teach you to cook even when you burn everything, who show up day after day even when it's hard. She'd learned that perfection is a prison and imperfection is freedom. And most importantly, she'd learned that sometimes the person who saves you is the one you never thought to notice. The janitor in the hallway, the child who can't speak, the grief that forces you to rebuild, the brokenness that teaches you how to be whole. Years later, when people asked how she'd managed to walk away from such a successful career, Evelyn would smile and say she hadn't walked away from anything. She'd walked toward something better. And when they asked what her greatest achievement was, she didn't mention the company she'd built or the millions she'd made. She talked about two little girls who'd been drowning in grief and a man who'd taught her how to listen. About learning to cook and failing spectacularly and trying again anyway. About planting a tree that changed colors with the seasons and a family that grew from the ruins of everything she'd lost. She talked about showing up, day after day, year after year, through the mess and the mistakes and the moments of unexpected grace. Because that, she'd learned, was what mattered. Not the grand gestures or the perfect plans, just the quiet, persistent choice to be present for the people who needed you, even when you didn't have all the answers. Especially when you didn't have all the answers. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.